I do. Hi, everybody. Hello, everyone. Hi. Someone's saying your microphone is not on. Because I can hear it. She can hear Dana. It's a she, is it? Oh, I'm sorry. Or he. The My apologies. Oh, good. No, yeah. So I'll take over the show while they're waiting because they can hear me. Hi, everybody. I'm Dana, and we're having a few problems with the microphone on the other side that you have plenty of time to catch up on. You're a she. Hi. Thank you. My apologies. Okay, and so we're going to talk about Fukushima. I'm going to share screens for a few moments and just show you through and explain some pictures of Fukushima. We're going to talk about tanks, and we're going to talk about the so-called tritium. Maybe some of you fine folks, are familiar with tritium. And tritium, I think it's pretty safe to say this is reactor 3 and 4. Tritium is something that you're not quite worried about compared to reactor cores, the uranium, plutonium. The biggest byproduct of the fuel rods that are in a reactor. The reactor makes heat by boiling water by splitting atoms. And so they're normally in a containment. And when they take them out to change the so called fuel, which is many, many tons, they change about 1/3 of the cycle of the fuel each year. And at the top of the buildings that don't exist no more were 4 fuel pools full of reactor cores, two at the top of 190-foot buildings each. And there was 4 of these buildings. Now, just a single one of the buildings, reactor 3 to your left and reactor 4 to your right, both of them should have been razed all the way to the ground. There's actually nothing functional left there. They kept it there in order to build a PR campaign to pretend that there was no damage. Now, currently, they're saying only 2.2 grams got out of these 4 buildings, and this is 2 of them. And just double check the comments here.
Yeah, can I interrupt you a bit, Dana? I'm curious
Absolutely. Are
if
you
people
through?
if people will hear me now. Can you all hear me now, dear people? Welcome, by the way, for dropping in on this fifth live talk with Dana from Canada. I hope you can hear me now. I see the mic responding now.
Yeah, they can hear you.
Ha! Yay!
That's great.
Very important.
I
But
forgot that for a second. I'm sorry.
no,
Sounds great.
yeah, it sounds great. Look,
Yeah.
everyone's saying hello, everyone.
And the,
Uh,
and the audio on my end is on my side is perfect.
yeah, you hear me
Coming
too
from
very
here,
well.
right? Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like the tone and everything is really good.
All
Hi,
right. Well, then I will not interrupt you further, Dana. Continue with.
so just so everybody, because there are a lot of people just joining the show,
Yeah.
is I run the nuclearproctologist.org website, and I also am a researcher, and I also do a lot of presentations, several thousand, in fact, on this topic. And I do 5 shows a week on this topic for typically an hour and a half to 2 hour. And we also cover the local news cycle. Currently, for the last 70 days, 79 days actually, since July the 13th, we've been covering a unique story on Fukushima. Obviously, it was devised by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Taiwan, South Korea, China are working in tandem with Japan to promote a story. And the story is it's a new version of what happened 12 years ago. And so it's a little complicated, but once I show you the pictures in a second, we're going to go to full screen for a few minutes. I'm going to show you these pictures. And we should have full screen there hopefully right now on your end.
It should go automatically even that you can share.
Did that show up?
No.
Are you looking at the reactor buildings or just me? Okay.
I don't I don't see oh, wait.
I must have double clicked it or something.
Yeah. I don't see it should be automatically.
It's sharing now. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Can we see the reactors?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to run you through the story of Fukushima. Now, officially, only 2.2 grams of tritium got out of these buildings, but these buildings were 190 foot tall. These are reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi. And if you haven't seen these pictures, it's because we've been covering it up for 12 years. And you're in very great hands today. We're going to get you right up to speed. It's not a difficult story when it's presented in the right format. And we happen to have that here. This was the reactor 1 building. Now, because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet for the fuel, they had approximately 10 to 12 reactor cores at the top of the building. These were 190 foot, 55, 60 meter buildings, and say 19-story apartment buildings. And they were 150 feet wide, 50 meters wide. And what happened was this was a pulse explosion. Each of the reactor cores, and there was around 10 of them at the top of the building, each one was capable of being the equivalent of 100 Chernobyls, because these are pure uranium, pure plutonium, and a lot of plutonium, by the way. And that Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was just using a small inventory compared to the inventories of these reactor cores. The buildings, and there's 4 of them. That's reactor 1. Now, that detonation lost most of the fuel pool, and which had decades of reactor cores. It was a significant event. And the reactor core inside of it burnt constantly for several days at around 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and went into a term you're probably familiar with, is known as China syndrome. But it's just meant to articulate that the reactor's gone deep into the earth. And so this contraption you're looking at was built to put a Kevlar sarcophagus around the reactors. This is off-site. And I use this to give you context of how big the buildings actually are. And so they put 4 of them. That bottom piece down there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry? That bottom piece, go ahead.
Sorry, Dana,
right?
I put it off, the notification. So let me see what is still... Oh, that is... I apologize.
It's okay.
I put it off. So, and it's great, of course. Thank you for... There is a new subscriber and follower, but I put it all off. So, okay. All right. So now it should not happen again. I apologize again. All right.
Okay.
This is live streaming, dear people. So, okay, Dana, continue.
So where should I pick up to? From where? Just right there at that time?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I was just scrolling your comments, and there's no comments off question for me.
I did
for nuclear.
I did see a question come by from Jos, I believe, but it's maybe not in your chat.
What do you think of the Ukraine war, Dana? For me, it's clear that it concerns raw materials in the soil, including uranium. Ukraine is the biggest producer of wheat worldwide. The United Nations has which is a military-industrial complex, has another subsidy company known as, oh my goodness, it's like a little UNICEF. And they raise money to give the radioactive wheat from Ukraine. Ukraine is completely contaminated. A lot of Europe is contaminated from Chernobyl, but Ukraine in particular is very bad. And Ukraine has orphanages after orphanages after orphanages of disfigured and deformed children with severe autism, Down syndrome, schizophrenia, born because of the poison from Chernobyl. Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, 3,000 miles away. So imagine how bad the farms are in Ukraine, which is right there. And I've done an entire. My last show on Chernobyl was 900 academic studies. I piled into it to try to get people to comprehend how many things they're studying besides congenital malformations and everything else. It's just so many facets you can't even wrap your mind around. Radioactive pharmaceuticals, because a lot of the farmlands, and so they're shipping all this wheat out of there, sustains the most impoverished worldwide, and that's contaminated severely and recontaminated, reliberated, because when they have forest fires down there, the radiation that's sequestered in the forest fire is liberated back into the environment and contaminates the current farmer's field, and even half a planet away. Severe contamination. And so after Chernobyl, for instance, one of the big studies they done right away was the sex birth ratios of males and females in all of Europe, because that would demonstrate to them that Chernobyl had blanketed everything. And you know that because he closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. So what they're looking for is more males than females. And when you see that, they also know that's true for all the species. And in fact, more so for the species because they're much more vulnerable to that radiation. And so the proxy war, which is a NATO war in Ukraine, was meant to drive up inflation worldwide. So Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, a whole lot of shakers and movers, current, past, present, future, were at the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab's economic forum. And there's over 600 Canadian parliamentary members go there each year, so we're totally corrupted. But anyway, there's a lot going on in the background. There was also a lot of biolabs Americans had admit to publicly several months after the war. But inflation, right? So you came out of the COVID, you needed something to stop any more production. So what they're trying to do is stifle production worldwide. And Ukraine was the catalyst to drive up fuel prices and commodities worldwide. And so coal prices doubled, oil prices doubled, minerals doubled, commodities, recyclables doubled, all kinds of things shot up. And it made, the price of wood for building a home went crazy. And this was on purpose to stifle production. One of the reasons done the COVID was a result of Fukushima fallout covered the whole planet. And I think it was just an experiment to see if they can stop, because you got 80 years of emissions. It went down a rabbit hole. You got 80 years of emissions from nuclear power plants, and it never goes away. So think of a snowstorm that covers the entire planet after about 20 days, and the snow never stops coming, and the snow never melts. So you can picture that one. That's not good, is it? The whole planet's covered in a snowstorm and it never goes away forever. But think of it as radioactive fallout, and it's every day too, but you can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But a single atom that's pulsing at the speed of light every second, when it's sequestered in your muscles, your organs, your bones, your body's going to attack it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And eventually your body will build a sarcophagus around it. You call it a tumor. But just imagine if you're getting 11 becquerels, which is atoms. Each becquerel says an atom is a pulse of energy, almost at the speed of light going off. When that gets into your body is wrecking all kinds of cells and chromosomes and DNA and making lesions on your organs and everything else for the rest of your life, almost at the speed of light every second. And what happens is your body's response to that is repair all the cells every second, so it can't do that. And so now the cells are getting damaged more, they're getting repaired. So at the same, now it starts concentrating white blood cells from all your joints and everything up on that spot. So now you have weakened your immune system. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign because it operated properly, but you get all this radiation. And for children and insects and animals and mammals and birds and stuff like the smaller species, they're extremely vulnerable to it, right? Because they're developing. And so when it sequesters in their bones, and it does, burn holes through their lungs and up in their bones, and it mutates the stem cells. And then we had a pulse event happen 11, 12 years ago from Japan. We had a huge emissions into the environment that dwarfs all nuclear testing and accidents combined in quantity and quality. And what that done to the ecosystem was it started wiping out the bacteria and the fungus in the forest. And so the forests are no longer breaking down the foliage or the litter. And so when you start getting lightning strikes after a few years, the forest fires that erupts, or this foliage, these leaves that didn't break down are very big compared to what normally would have been in the ecosystem. But when you got rid of the bacteria and the fungus, we know this from Chernobyl and other places, when you get rid of the bacteria and the fungus, the earth doesn't soak up water. The water just runs off, and so you get all these amazing flash floods you would normally never see there because the ground is not soaking up the water no more. But also, the forest is so dry, tinder dry, that when you do get lightning strikes, the whole forest burns instead of just the upper parts of the forest. Because normally the bottom parts, all the root system has, but the roots don't work without the fungus and the bacteria. And it's the same thing for everything that breaks down the forest. And we kind of went off subject. We kind of, not off subject, but you went way down the rabbit hole in the subject. And so you can see the correlation if you go back to 2011 and look at the abnormalities of typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes and unusual events, whether like wind over 200 miles per hour, sustained coming ashore. And when it hits the coastline, the storms are so big and so wide, it just sits there for days and eats up everything at 200 miles per hour, 235, 260 mile per hour gust. And we've seen like 5 hurricanes in a row in the Atlantic a few years back with these types of winds. We don't have any infrastructure to withstand that kind of wind because we don't have building codes for that because we've never seen that before. But we're seeing it post Fukushima. And it's the same thing because we kill the phytoplankton in the ocean and the freshwater surfaces because they're the first to be, and they're the biggest piece of real estate. The radioactive fallout. Think of a snowstorm covering the planet, a lot of it's going into the ocean. It's the same thing with radioactive fallout. And so that wiped out the phytoplankton. And what species are vulnerable to, dependent upon the phytoplankton? Well, every species in the ocean, but it's also 50% of the oxygen that the planet is produced here. And so when you wiped out the phytoplankton, what you expected to see and what you do see, and what the research expeditions that we've done for many years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean, counting species we're seeing, was an extinction event. And, I'm going to show you some of that documentation. In fact, I'll bring it up to you because the most important part of Fukushima to remember is there's so many things, the repercussion, and this has been going on for 80 years, but Fukushima was the straw that broke the ecosystem's back. And so let me show you, I'm going to share the screen with you here in a moment. And it's what's really hard to comprehend, I'm probably sure for most people, is that a few buildings could have these kind of attributes. And so you'll understand that though by the end of the show, and you'll be extremely well informed. And Ray, I'll come back and we'll chat after these few pictures.
I also saw some questions come by, but yeah.
Good. We'll come right back after we jump through these pictures from the research expeditions.
Yeah, sure.
So folks here can see the pictures. Okay. So this is one of the boats, and that was in the water yesterday, by the way. And so that I done with these boats here, 6 years of research from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada to Alaska. And there's around 27,000 islands, which will take you 71 years to visit an island a day. Think about context. And so what I done was went up and looked for the species. And I used to be an ex-commercial diver, and I worked in both oceans, but I know this coastline very well. And so I spent years and years, 4 to 5 months at a time. And what I discovered was quite stunning. The species to your left, which were there in 2011, had disappeared. And the reason I went year after year, and so keep your eye on the species to your left, they're now exterminated. We went back year after year to see if they recovered. and very arduous, very long journeys for many months at a time without coming home. And to our absolute horror, the species to your left didn't recover. These are the post picture to your right. And I used to work in that environment, very familiar with all the anchorages, the whole coastline. And so normally you can never run up on a beach because they're loaded with sea urchins, the purples and the reds, right? So normally I can never do that on a beach. A beach does not look like that pre-Fukushima. And so normally you feel guilty coming ashore because there's so many species, see? And it's impossible to come ashore without hurting or killing something. So a lot of times you feel guilty. And these places, this is super low tides is when I'm taking the pictures and documentation. So I go up and walk the coastline for miles and miles and miles and miles of coastline. And so normally you cannot go ashore without stepping on wildlife and by proxy being almost getting hurt because it's so slippery, right? And so there was over 7,000 highly visible species to your left that are now missing to your right. And we quantify that by doing it year after year after year. And currently we're doing research expeditions on the East Coast. We're attempting to, we're having huge difficulties. And we have been ostracized from the mainstream lexicon. And so what I do in retaliation, to try to educate the population, so what I do in five 1.5 2 hour shows on this subject and current news on this subject each week. If I'm not each year, usually I'm on the ocean a lot. So the species to your left, that's a normal picture. And so on the ocean floor, that was normal to me. On these coastlines at nighttime where I'm anchoring. And I done the whole coastline. And the reason I done it was so nobody can say the information didn't exist. That information is available up at the nuclearproctologist.org from the research. And the GPSs of everywhere that I've been is documented with the pictures. And so what we discovered was Fukushima fallout did have catastrophic effects. And what we're seeing now 12 years later is just the big picture. And so, well, ask the host here now, who's probably got your eye on some questions, do you?
I did see some questions come by. And it's also nice. And can I ask you to maybe for specifically the people who are not used for the quick English speech to do it a bit slow down.
Great idea. Thank you for reminding me, by the way. Because each episode I still haven't learned.
Yeah, well, it's your enthusiasm that is also nice. Let me see. What are the questions? We came by already. This one. By the way, thank you for Artis Liberalis who said on YouTube too. He also says like, for questions you can type in question or Q in the chat, capital Q. Then I see it very well in the chat. And wait, here is. I did a question come by. Yeah, question from Artis Liberalis. In how many years does radiation poisoning get out of your DNA, if it gets out of it at all?
Yeah, no, it doesn't get out. No, it sequesters there. Your body attacks it, keeps it there. Basically, it electrically binds with your chromosomes, your DNA. It settles down. Well, it likes to go in your organs, your bones, or your muscles. And then it'll just, what's known as sequestering means it's going to stay there. And the industry, has tried to imply that it only stays in your body for a certain amount of time, then you magically pass it out. But the academic studies clearly show that doesn't happen. And that all the dogs and all the studies, like a typical study, you got 140 dogs. The dogs are inhaling plutonium, and they'll get 3 different types of tumors. They'll get a liver tumor, lung tumor, and a bone tumor. The majority, 90 of the dogs say, will die of bone tumors, and then liver or lung tumors, and then liver tumors last will be. But typically, you'll get 3 tumors, but one will get you before the other ones. And in other words, it gets in your body and it goes to work right away. And your body attacks with white blood cells, and that's how you end up with the tumor. It's rejected because your body does, it's man-made, and so your body doesn't recognize it, doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And so it does what it does for everything else, where it throws everything at it. So it throws white blood cells at it, which decreases your red blood cells, and you have less oxygen nutrition going throughout your body. And so, yeah, it doesn't. That's hopefully that answers your question. It doesn't get out of your body.
Yes. Another one. Ready for another one, Dana?
Yes.
I have another from Bobby Dogstone on YouTube. Thank you for being on YouTube as well, watching and listening. The question is, what is the half-life of the radioactive material that is dumped into the oceans?
And so that's that question. If are you familiar with is you asking about tritium? So I'm just going to wait for you to reply in the comment, because I'm pretty sure that's what you're asking about. And if you're talking about tritium, then I got the right answer for you.
Exactly.
Now tritium is the last isotope you're worried about. I'm going to bring you to the full screen for a second, just long enough to explain tritium to you. Then I'll come back over here. So what can we do with the things you brought on topic? Well, you got to know yourself what the issue is. So I'm going to show you that right quick here. I have a neat way of explaining that to you. So what is the issue? What is the issue? So let's go back through some of the headlines from back in the day. The International Atomic Energy admitted that there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the standards are based on benefit, not safety. So radiation standards are based on benefit, not safety. That's the International Atomic Energy Agency. So they're talking about natural stuff. They're not talking about stuff from nuclear meltdowns or nuclear power plants or from nuclear weapons. So that their standards are based upon bananas and potato chips, which are you can't make a nuclear weapon out of. So they don't have a standard, in other words. So so they should be disbanded because they don't serve a purpose if they're not actually going to have a standard. So I always thought that was such a bizarre statement. But if you look to the cancer doctors, nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. And that one of the things, there's 1,800 diseases you got to worry about on top of this. And so we're already deep down the rabbit hole. We're 80 years into this radioactive apocalypse. And this thing is in auto mode at the current mode. And I'll explain that extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases. This is 2012. That the death rates might give the creeps to some people. So in a single month, Japan showed an extra 12,700 people dropping dead of heart attacks. They showed there was actually 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, and not everybody got health care. There was, in the first year, by 2012, a study came out. Now, typically there's 1 in a million children will have thyroid tumors. And because the thyroid is 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. And so they were showing 13,646 out of 38,000 with sometimes multiple tumors on their thyroids. And that means a whole lot of things. But one of the things it means is that scaled up at 35.8%, if you check a million kids, that's going to be 358,000 of a million with tumors 2 centimeters on a gland that's only 3 by 5 centimeters. But in order for that to happen, you had to saturate the thyroid gland pretty severely, which meant you're producing a huge, massive amount of radioactive hormones. And that's all you're producing is radioactive hormones. Which means you're loading up the pituitary gland with radioactive hormones. And the pituitary gland, of course, its function is incredibly important to your mental and physical well-being. In complete total. It's totally dependent upon those hormones. So these are catastrophic numbers. They're also seeing 6 out of 10 children with diabetes. And the reason was 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesion in vital organs. Irreversible lesions in your vital organs. Now, the limit that they allegedly are shipping food, 1 billion pounds a year out of the nuclear wasteland, they've never stopped growing it, is 1 billion pounds a year. And that's at, they claim that 100 becquerels a kilogram. But we know for a fact that it's infinitely more than that. And so we're in real trouble. Now, Canada's, there was 55 countries banned the food for 10 years from 14 prefectures, not just Japan. But you get heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's around 1,800 these, well, literally everything in a medical textbook. Because your body has a foreign invader and it reacts to it by flooding your body with white blood cells. So you have no oxygen, no nutrition going through your body anymore because of the lack of red blood cells. They call that leukemia, by the way. And you have a hypoxia because of this. And when you got hypoxia, you're making, your immune system is completely compromised. Child's risk of cancer is 10 to 100 times higher. And so the research, and that's just to kind of give you that mode, get you in that train of thought. And let me show you just 2 or 3 more, and I'll come back over. 11 becquerels a kilogram, children start to see heart problems. 11 becquerels a kilogram. So I'll put that in context for you. 11 becquerels a kilogram. You can put 200 million becquerels on the head of a needle. These think of an atom as a becquerel, and a becquerel has a pulse of energy at the speed of light, happening every second with each of those atoms. And they wreck the DNA and the chromosomes and the lesions on your organs, everything else. It does that for the rest of your life every second. And 60 seconds every minute, and 1,440 minutes a day for the rest of your life, pulsing energy. And if you die and they incinerate you, cremate you, your ashes, you'll liberate that radiation back into the environment. It'll float around for 1 million years if necessary, find another host, sequester in their body, and do the same thing to them that have done to you 1 million years down the road. That's some of the attributes these things have. And so it's very dangerous, very long time. And they've been releasing it because you can't contain the emissions. And so I'll bring up again later, but when I think about it, I always want to remind you is that the stuff that's in the fuel pools, which is, less than 2 years old, and it comes out of the reactor, it goes into what they call a fuel pool. It's in the pool to cool down, but it's hot because it's splitting atoms. And those atoms are the atoms we're talking about, the harmful atoms, and there's no containment. And so they're released on site every day through the tall, skinny stacks. And most of the nuclear power plants worldwide are surrounded by farms, very prime land, very active farms. And when they're building dumps and stuff like this, that's what they buy is prime farmland. And the idea is to follow from the repackaging and the shipping and everything is vented when it's shipped. It's a snowstorm. It's hard to comprehend. And I can show you though. I'll show you what's happening each and every day worldwide. And now think of gas, oil, and cold in this equation. Gas, oil, and cold. So this is Neptunium-239 dispersal after 20 days from Japan. So think about how that follower works. And you got to remember that if you accept that that's plutonium or neptunium, and that decays to plutonium-239, which is a terrible, terrible isotope, was named after the devil, and is going to be equal amounts in this depiction. This is only based on 20 days. This is only based on venting, and it's not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. So the buildings are actually gone. So what they've based this depiction on is venting. It's not based on the actual inventories that were lost, which are around 6 to 10 reactors at the top of each of the buildings. There's 4 buildings confirmed missing. So each day from the 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, there's plumes of every isotope you can imagine being created, and it never goes away. And so we have reached saturation point. And so they're reaping what they know ultimately this was going to lead to. Because the fuel pools, each reactor core boils water for 1 million homes by splitting atoms. You put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. Imagine how many atoms we're actually talking about. And these depictions are only based on venting, not based on the inventories, the reactor fuel, the reactor cores, or the fuel pools from the buildings. They're just based on the original couple of days where the industry claimed they were venting. But remember, they had a tsunami rip out 1,200 miles of the coastline. There was no telephone poles. They didn't have any power. And so they actually couldn't even vent. There was a total meltdown of the buildings. So there's lots of studies, like 1,500 atoms of the radioactive sulfur. This was because they were spraying salt water on the reactor. And it's a phenomenon they've known since the 50s with the ocean testing, that the sulfur is liberated from the salt water due to the enormous temperatures, and that the uranium, plutoniums, the radioactive americium, neptuniums, the strontiums are uptake by the sulfur, and then is known as the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And these are hot, very, very, everything from a nuclear meltdown is a hot particle. But these are very, very, very hot particles. They're very mobile, and they're not solutable in water. And so you breathe them in, and the insects and birds and mammals and animals and kids, which are very low to the ground, very vulnerable. And so there's independent studies showing huge plumes. This plume study was 1 to 10 million becquerels of cesium-137 by France government. And there was another study from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research of 1 million of xenon-133, which burns a hole through your lung. And so the numbers we're talking about, we've never heard tell of these numbers. This was a study out of Canada, ran with 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter sustained falling on the US and Canada. This was a Canadian study. And another one at 220 million atoms per liter. So these two in particular are going to saturate the thyroid glands of all the species. This is not going away for 15 million years. And it was detected, obviously, in the drinking supplies to large numbers. Elevated levels continue for months, but it doesn't go away. It never goes away, and your Geiger counters that you're going to buy can't find that. So you got different isotopes. You got uranium, iodine 130 or 129. You got 137. You got the 129, the 131 iodine. You got the xenon 133. And I just showed, the first one I showed was the cesium back there. I'll go to it again. You got sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. All of these different isotopes are all traveling together. And that's the ratio. So when you find 20 million particles of radioactive iodine 131, you're going to extrapolate, that's what they're going to do, that there's 10 times more iodine 132, there's 30 times more iodine 133, there's 31 times more iodine 129, and that the 132 iodine to 133 iodines are 9 times more effective ionizing radiating the thyroid glands than the really, really, really effective 131 is. And that when you talk about these huge numbers, you can, when they're in the forest, and I'll come back over to the screen here. Now, the problem with all these numbers, let me explain that part. So there's big numbers, right? Everybody agrees. These are huge numbers. These are unprecedented. These are academic studies that are quantifying that assertion. And so you got betas and alphas and gammas and neutrons. They're all pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. Call them an atom, and each atom, when it pulses, it can do that forever, every second, is a becquerel. A becquerel is energy at the speed of light. Imagine your cells getting hit with something at the speed of light. And so your cells, where they're so small, they can't handle that. And their DNA can't handle that. And it happens every second, wherever this stuff is sitting to, in birds and trees and plants and animals and insects, which are much more vulnerable. And so the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas, when they pulse energy at the speed of light, they don't mix together. And what happens is they change direction. And so when you look at the big numbers that we're talking about per liter, and imagine that now that's known as they're hitting each other at the speed of light to change direction. That's a braking effect, and you know it as X-rays. And so you're getting whole body X-rays to the ecosystem, to the bacteria, the fungus, to the biota, and to all the species that are bigger. And they're all dependent upon, everything is dependent upon fungus and bacteria, right? if you get rid of the fungus and bacteria, then everything else disappears too. And if you get rid of carbon, now carbon emissions don't cover the entire planet. Carbon emissions don't pulse energy every second. And we can't exist without carbon. Everything we've got is carbon. And so the industry appears to decided to blame carbon, right? And that way you demonize everything that's living, and by proxy, you don't mind us killing it down the road. It's a subconscious thing, you know. And we have this saturation point on our planet from this pulse event and 80 years before that of the emissions. And if you go back in time and look at the nuclear wars you had a nuclear war when the Soviet Union set off their biggest nuclear weapon, which was a 50 megaton, the Taser Bomba or something. And that was equal to 3,800 Hiroshimas detonating at Nagasaki plutonium bomb. Because Hiroshima was a uranium bomb, which is nasty, and plutonium is a little bit worse, unfortunately. And that's what all current bombs are based on, plutonium. And so plutonium is 100% man-made. And we don't have, it's very energetic for long past the human experience. And detonating 3,800 Nagasaki bombs at the one time, that's a nuclear war. That's a nuclear war. So the radioactive fallout, I'm saying, is the animosity equivalent of a nuclear war. And so when you look at all nuclear weapons testing, the fallout from that was stunning. There's 1 million square kilometers, 1 million square kilometers of the Marshall Islands that are too radioactive to be habitable for a very long time into the future because of something that happened decades ago from the so-called nuclear testing. But nuclear testing is not testing at all. So out there they set off the Bravo bomb, for instance. That was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. And on top of that, they atomized and aerosol, ionized and radiated islands. So they took islands and turned them into radioactive atoms, and that was released into the environment as radioactive fallout. And the other problem with that one was they liberated the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs by nuking the salt water at the same time. So they created that. You want to go back and look, where did the species start declining? It was at the nuclear industry inception. Once you started releasing these invisible plumes that covered the entire planet in short order, you set the course to the near future. And Fukushima was a pulse event. And so we had multiple meltdowns all over the world that have been covered up. But each of the reactors in Japan are far exceeding all nuclear reactor meltdowns worldwide combined for each of the buildings. And that's got to get it. We got to deal with this at some point in the future. Now, the industry can't survive if this narrative comes out. And so recently, on August the 24th, everybody knows the Tritium story, I would imagine. They're releasing water from Fukushima tanks into the ocean. And what they're trying to do is pretend, and I apologize to Ray for, we're supposed to take questions. Let's take some questions, actually, because
I was just.
you know what I'm like? I won't stop. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's totally fine. No, it's very. I'm also very concentrating on what you're talking about, so I really want to let it in, because every time I learn more from. It's now the 5th time that you're my guest here, but every time I learn more, and because of repetition, I also understand even more, and I feel already a lot. I'm a feeler, and not so into all theoretic things, but I feel. Many things are so combining for me even stronger. How, for example, also the cancer and so on has increased worldwide, and everything, the environment. But let's go to the questions indeed. And I myself have also a few questions before I will answer the other questions. Like you mentioned about it, that was one of my main things, like how are China and so on, because you talked about that they are now working together with Japan. Is that what you said in the beginning? That I heard you talking about that.
About who?
And that they work together in cloaking what really happened, and as well with the.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So and I do a news cycle 5 days a week, and this is what we're seeing for over a decade is that the media colluding with the universities and governments to cover up Fukushima's event, and the most obvious of that, and I'll bring that up. You can keep. I'll just bring up the most obvious picture that tells that story. It's done, and I just accidentally closed my folder. So here we go. Alrighty, I'll share screens with us as soon as I can find the picture. There we go. So what was interesting in 2013?
Are you sharing now? Because there
No,
is...
I'm sorry. Any second here.
It
Here we go.
doesn't matter.
I'm glad you reminded me. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, of course.
Here we go. No, because you got a good memory. I don't for this stuff. So the buildings to your right. Am I sharing screen? I should be sharing screen.
Yes, you're sharing. Yeah.
So the picture to the right is mainstream media pretending they're in the fuel pool in 2013, 2014 at the top of reactor 4, which actually doesn't even exist. And what you see left of the building to the right should have been razed all the way to the ground. The building actually doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. And so the reason they didn't do it is they wanted to pretend that they were in the fuel pools at the top of the building that doesn't exist anymore. And this is just a fraction of the media. Now, why would the world's media pretend they're in a building that don't exist? What could possibly compel them to do something like that? Right? That's probably one of the most important questions. Well, and here's an example of them doing the same thing for reactor 3. And I cover this stuff all the time. I cover it as it happens too, by the way. And then we use it to tell the story later. So media representative walks on top of number 3 reactor building. And so number 3 is the building to your right. So you can't walk on top of the building that doesn't exist. And they've done the same thing for this building. You can't walk on top of that building. So why, knowing these pictures exist, right, the interesting question is, why is the media claiming that they're on top of the building that don't exist? Because of the catastrophic effect it had on planet Earth worldwide, and which we quantified by doing research expeditions for many, many years. And what we showed year after year after year by doing these research expeditions for 4 or 5 months, and I put GPSs with all my research expeditions for the 6 years that I'd done it, was that the species to your left were exterminated. And that's why they were faking the buildings being intact, because they didn't want the nuclear industry to get held accountable. Because the industry is a very... so 90% of the money that's used in nuclear, which is, they have access to the monetary systems on top of everything else, 90% of it is used for administration, not for actual infrastructure. So for the industry to build anything, it has to chew up 90% of the money just for administration. So only 10% goes to material. So if they want to build a garage, they need, if they got $1 million, then 900,000 of it goes to the office workers. Only 100,000 actually goes into building the building. And that's how they work all the time for everything. And this way they have all kinds of extra money. And then say, like just recent today came out, the sizable C, I think in the United Kingdom they're going to start. The original number was $18 million, and the new number is $18 billion. And so now that they're going to start to do it, the number has grown to 39 billion. And as we know from every previous nuclear power plant, long before it gets halfway, that number will double or triple. So it's exorbitant. And so then ultimately the price, it's really... it's the weapons. It's all about. So nuclear is about a nuclear cycle and fuel. They want the fuel to go through the nuclear chain reaction for about 18 months. And once it goes through about 18 months, then they're able to extrapolate enough plutonium to make a few bombs. That's all it's about. And then if you look at France La Hague fuel reprocessing facility, which has 500 security guards, and you look at Sellafield and the lake, their legacy is horrific. And then you look at Donna Ray's another. It's going to be 315 years before that's cleaned up. If you look at Hanford in the United States, Hanford dumped so much nuclear waste, like unbelievable, dangerous, about a liter waste, into the soil in the 40s and 50s. They could build an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And if you take a couple of liters of that and put it at a subway station, everybody walks past it will die that day for 1,000,000 years. That's how dangerous the stuff we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they dumped so much you can build a wall 518 feet tall wrapped around the planet of it. And that's just one of the, China done the same thing. Soviet Union done the same thing. Russia's Mayak is doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan and India are doing the same thing. So how long can the planet survive in this catastrophic? This
Exactly.
stuff is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe that is then this question of Bobby that was already a while ago. But so, what can we do about the things you brought on topic? Yeah, that maybe fits now that question coming from the chat.
Not much.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not much. Well, so one of the things you definitely can do is you can end nuclear, and you can do that
Mm.
by making the world appreciate the adverse side effects of the emissions that dictate you got to shut them all down right now. They're not necessary on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, if you went after say, well, we're only going to shut down nuclear power plants that are surrounded by farms because they're always emission and the food goes out to the supermarket and all these people get sick and die and get terrible diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries from eating this stuff. Then you got to close down every nuclear power plant on the planet. They're so evil that their plants are designed to be built in farmland to get rid of the emissions to ship it out to the supermarkets. That's how crazy they actually are,
Mm-hmm.
and that dictates that you got yourself a real issue on your hand. So,
Yeah.
what do? You don't want to eat shellfish because shellfish bioaccumulate radiation about 125,000 times more than a codfish, for instance, does, or any fish does. So you can eat a bowl of radioactive, highly contaminated seafood, like clams or mussels or scallops or something like that, and you can have serious cancer within a couple of weeks from the displacement of your red blood cells turning into white blood cells. So your body now can't function anymore. You have hypoxia. They call it leukemia, is what they call that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have so much white blood cells in your body that you don't have any more red blood cells to function. That's called leukemia. And taking someone in the hospital and blasting them with radiation doesn't cure right? And
Yeah.
that's what people are doing. Yeah.
It is.
Okay, we kind of
Yeah, it's
got off track a little
bizarre
bit.
because I saw in one of these documentaries of people were then near Fukushima, and that then there was a jewelry shop which was robbed, and then I had to think about that was emptied there, and these people, where are these jewelry? They might end up in Europe or somewhere else in the world with a
Somewhere,
one
they're going somewhere.
particle. One active particle can damage. That's
If
if
it's
I
inhaled
think.
in your body and this stuff comes in, if it's from the wasteland,
Mm,
you're talking huge, huge numbers.
uh,
Um,
mm,
Now, a couple of months back, there was urban explorers went back into Okuma.
mm,
It's about 2.5 miles, 2.5 kilometers actually, from the ongoing nuclear meltdowns. This is
mm,
abandoned. And they went there in 2019 and videotaped this hospital, and everything was obviously left behind. All
mm.
the the all expensive equipment, $1 billion or something worth of equipment. Um, so they went back this year, and all that equipment is gone.
Exact.
Everything's
Yeah,
gone
I saw that
from a
too.
from a nuclear wasteland.
Yeah.
And I was my God. So people that are very vulnerable are in the hospital where they're being given this stuff.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's horrific. But shall we continue with more questions, Dana? Are you up for
Yeah, by
that?
all
Because
means. Yeah,
otherwise,
always.
then we can also do that, of course, at the end. But I think now it's maybe a
No,
good
no, keep
moment.
going. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
Delvertje, Delvertje, thank you for your question again. It was already 24 minutes ago, but question, is the nuclear plant in Petten, that's, yeah, maybe you heard of that, but that's a nuclear plant in Netherlands, that makes
Right? I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
that makes medical products just as potential dangerous as a nuclear power plant or a plant for nuclear weapons.
Right. And so if you go out to Elsevier, Springer, or Wiley, any of the major publishers, and you type in sex ratio studies, and then you look at these sex ratio studies, you'll find out that they do sex ratio studies around these small nuclear medical, what they call medical, which I call genocide, but medical isotopes. What you're going to notice is they've done a lot of studies around these plants. And the only reason you would do a sex ratio study around these small reactors, these small megawatt reactors, is because you're expecting a huge amount of contamination. And you'll start finding all kinds of studies from all over the world on the small research reactors. And that's the equivalent of acknowledging that they all hemorrhage radiation. And the radiation gets out from the fuel pools. So when they put it in the fuel pools, there's no containment, and the fuel rods are still splitting atoms. And a big fuel pool will boil off about 120,000 liters a day. There's about 1,000 of those pools worldwide. So 120,000 liters is 120 tons. So 121-ton pickup trucks. And each liter, there's 1,000 liters in a ton. Each liter is going to have trillions and trillions and trillions of very, very dangerous. Curium is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods. Excuse me, isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And plutonium kills all the animals in all the studies, for instance. And so curium is 20 times worse. Is the biggest byproducts coming out of the fuel rods around these sites that are in the pools. Australia bought up a whole bunch of farmers' land in Kimba, Australia, and this is where they were going to store the medical waste 600 feet below ground. So the medical waste is so dangerous, they want to store it in a deep geological repository, just like the rest of the waste. So instead of being a reactor that can power 1 million homes with electricity and businesses and that, it's just a small reactor. But the fuel rod's the same fuel rod. Right? And so what that means is the emissions around the sites are very dangerous. And a typical nuclear power plant will have around 1,000, in North America, has about 60 to 150 sirens within 10 miles of it. And the idea is people can evacuate that zone, which means if you live within 10 miles of a nuclear power plant, you're in great harm. It's impossible not to breathe it or have it infiltrate your home. And you can't filter this stuff out because you can put 200 million atoms in the head of a needle, but you can't see it. And so therefore you can't filter anything out because you have to filter everything in order to keep such a small particulate out. And so when they talk about Fukushima and the tritium, the releasing from the tanks, well, the thing to remember is that, and I'll bring a picture for you. We'll just talk because that's what we're supposed to talk about tonight was
Well,
Fukushima and the
yeah.
tanks.
We have there is it's such a wide topic, the nuclear and this, yeah.
It jumps everywhere. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is great. This is some pictures from my research expeditions, if anybody's not familiar. But that's not what we're looking for.
And while you're
Looks like we
searching,
gotta,
many questions come by, but continue,
yeah. Oh, well,
Dana.
we can come back. We can come back.
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me show this picture, and I'll come back and get some questions, and we'll jump back here. So this is the stump of reactor 3. Now, officially, this never happened. The official story is this is no longer true, and the building is completely gone. The official story as of July the 13th this year is that only 2.2 grams got out of these buildings, including the detonations. Nothing got out. And so After 12 years, they decided to pretend that nothing got out of the buildings. And they got people there to prove it. Look, the people on the right, that's your mainstream media. They wouldn't lie to you. They claim they're 100 feet above the stump to your left. So the claim that they're only releasing stuff after 12 years and it's only tritium is so dishonest, so disingenuous, and so dangerous that I got no choice but to come out and challenge that type of assertion, so that you can have an alternative narrative to think about, because they're not going to show you those pictures, and I am right, and that's why we're here today, is to help get you back up to speed. So one good question is uranium radioactive? I don't think so until it is regretted. Yeah, thank you. The uranium is slightly radioactive in the original form. It's toxic as a metal, but when it goes through it, the reactors are put into a mode known as a chain reaction. Then it changes. It produces all kinds of isotopes. Now it's like a breeder, and it starts producing uranium daughters and plutonium and curium and americium, neptunium. A lot of these probably are not familiar to you, but these isotopes are very dangerous to everything with replicating cells. And then when it gets followed in your pollen becomes radioactive. That goes back to your pollinators and the moths and everything. And you destroy the ecosystem by getting rid of the pollinators, because you're pollinating the hives too, right? One question is,
Shall I mention a
do you want
question?
to? Yeah,
Because
yeah,
that's a
definitely. Go
while
ahead.
back ago, and I
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you.
no, it's fine. But then it goes better, I guess, that I take the questions a bit earlier. Well, that was almost
Yeah.
30 minutes ago. This was from Nobby Noble. I think it's a question. Cesium 134, Cesium 137, and Xenon 133. Which one is worse in my kitchen? I have 2 grams of each. After Chernobyl and Windscale, I left my windows open. I'm not sure if that's really a question. So
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah.
Oh, that is a
Well,
question. Yeah,
that's a great
because.
question.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you got a gram there, you need to run as fast as you can
Yeah.
out of your house.
Yeah, that's why
Just
I had to
don't
let
look
in the
back. Just
question.
run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
30 minutes has gone by. It's probably too late.
whoa.
But you should have ran
Yeah.
when you found it. So a quarter of a gram of it was lost on the highway early in the year in Australia, and people driving past it on the highway would have got the same dose as a couple of X-rays driving past it at 60 kilometers an hour. So if you take a whole gram of it and put it on your kitchen table, down the road, this is going to come back and haunt you real, really bad.
Mm.
And and so you don't have a gram on your table, sir.
Yeah, that's why I read
You're
it
not
and
being
I
honest.
thought,
You're not very honest.
yeah. Oh gosh, well, I'm now skipping through this chat, and by the way, many of the dear people are greeting you, Dana, and thank you
Hi,
for
everyone.
being here.
Oh yeah, I love it here. This is great. My second home.
Yeah, it's now the 5th talk already, and I
Yeah,
love it.
totally comfortable here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great, of course.
Oh, and you got everybody needs to know this story, and so the more
Mm,
that I can spread it, the even better it is. Makes my day a
exactly.
lot better too. Yeah.
And I can tell of my own experience by diving into the subject, but specifically let go of all these theory and all the terms, because with the repetition, then it starts to enter, and that is
Oh,
for
yeah.
the people who might be overloaded with all kinds of
The
yeah.
first time hearing it is quite the shock to the
It
system.
is a lot, and again, it is invisible. But I
But it makes
sometimes.
sense. But it makes sense if you
Mm,
hear it from me, because I'm showing you pictures,
mm,
and you hang around long enough, then the pictures make sense for you,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, and
I just
I can say that because I watched quite a lot of your when you also were still live, but also your videos, and it really is then entering. That's great.
Yeah, and I used to do 5 live shows a week for anybody who didn't catch the little joke that time.
Mm.
But I don't do it live. I don't do it because you were saying when you used to be live, and
Yeah.
because August of 24, when officially they started releasing water from the plants which disappeared 12 years ago, um, they stopped me from live streaming on YouTube and Rumble. And when I contacted them, well, it was interesting. When I contacted YouTube, YouTube's got over 1 billion users.
Mm.
And when you sign into your account, up in the right hand, there's a little chat room. And so when they first put that new button, there wasn't that long ago. I clicked on it. There was probably about 9,000 people waiting to talk to somebody. But now when I use it, there's never anybody there, and I always get an answer immediately. And they assured me that there's nothing wrong with my account on their side.
Yeah. Oh. But what do
So
you think yourself is what? Because for the people who don't know, you are, well, being withheld from going live. That's
well,
actually the case.
I've had gag orders from the government to drag me through the court system up to 16 times.
Mm.
Gag orders for 3.5 years, so I couldn't talk about certain people in the nuclear industry,
Mm-hmm.
like Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and Ken Abusler, because the gag orders are up now. So, and Jay Cullen from the University of Victoria, the police department in Victoria. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't allowed to mention the University of Victoria. I wasn't allowed to mention Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and I wasn't allowed to mention the police department for 3.5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
That's that's quite the badge of honor there, right there. And I had just come off the ocean after a 5-month research expedition without coming home, up in the middle of nowhere, desperate to find out how bad Fukushima was, and discovered the species were exterminated. They were exterminated. And in shock and horror, because I had done around 600 radio interviews in the first 5 or 6 years or so. And so I got around, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so they came out with around 1,600 medias and dummied me, just dropped me on my head with propaganda. But I had to go to court 2 weeks after that to remove a bunch of the restrictions. I'm a provincial court judge. I wasn't allowed to do an interview about the subject without getting it approved by a provincial court judge, and so I had to go. I had a direct line to a provincial court judge for 3.5 years, basically, so I could do interviews because I wasn't stopping.
Yeah.
And
You're unstoppable.
I got no choice, right? I got no
Yeah.
choice.
I
If they
know
don't
how it
got anybody
feels.
else telling the story, it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing here today. I'm trying to get wound up a whole bunch of people over and get them, so the place I come from is a pretty tough gig, and so you got a kind of a tough sense of humor for a lot of things over the years.
Mm.
But it's a good sense. It's a legitimate sense of humor, right? And I don't understand, right? Everybody got an opinion on Trump. No one got an opinion on nuclear and Fukushima. Each
Mm-hmm.
in Fukushima had reactor 1, reactor 2, reactor 3, reactor 4 meltdown. At the top of each building was 8 fuel pools, and each of them had around 5 to 6 reactor cores because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet to store the reactor cores, so they're kept at the top of these boiling water reactor buildings designs. And so Chernobyl, which is considered the world's worst accident, was a single reactor building that was brand new. It was 2 years old. It was mixed. It was graphite reactors, which are nowhere near as bad as Japan's reactors, which are pure uranium, pure plutonium,
Mm-hmm.
which is significantly 100. Each reactor is 100 times worse. Think about 12 cores in the reactor pools. They're still the same principle. And so Chernobyl sent in a million people. People were going on the roofs to throw graphite blocks off the roof. Just pick one up, throw it off the roof, and go home and never get back on a nuclear site ever again. And it was shocking how many of these people ultimately got sick and died from
Mm.
debilitating illnesses and diseases and injuries.
Yeah, because
And
I
so,
saw. Sorry to interrupt you, but
go ahead, yeah.
because then I
You
get
saw.
spontaneously a question or what I was thinking about
Yeah,
in
keep
that
going.
video I saw about. Well, they have that shield there over that building of Fukushima, as well, and that I saw there people working there only with masks, not even suits. And I
Paper
thought,
suits. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
is that possible?
TEPCO said he burned 7,000 paper suits a day. Well, a paper suit can't shield you.
Mm,
You know, this is not paint. This is a nuclear meltdown, and
mm,
we're talking about gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays, and so you can't. There is no suit that can protect you,
no.
and so certainly a paper suit couldn't do it. And so the reason that they're doing that is because first off, when you see a paper suit at a nuclear meltdown, you know it's not a nuclear scientist because you're not going to get him on the site, let alone in a paper suit. Like,
Mm,
no way I'm getting into that thing.
yeah.
I'm leaving right now.
Yeah.
And the same thing for the academics, nuclear scientists, nuclear engineers. They're not going to that site.
Mm,
So what the site done is they shanghaied the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. That's when you see a paper suit. That's what you're looking at. And we have the actual headlines to quantify that assertion. And so, how can the most impoverished and the most typically uneducated segment of the unmotivated section of the population solve the most difficult problem of the planet, right?
mm,
And so, obviously, you can't. And what are they going to do? They're going to make it worse because they don't know any better. And just there's parts of that site they still don't have control of today because of the reactor cores were ejected from the buildings. And so this was covered up by remote controlled bulldozers. And then they put cement over that. Then they
mm,
put steel plates, they put 16-foot steel plates welded together over all the site. Then they put cement over that, pavement over that. And then they put more steel plates on top of that to shield them from the neutron bombardment from below, from some of the places where they buried the actual. So three sieverts, which is one way to describe the emissions from the fuel itself,
mm.
is a lethal dose to humans. If just a short exposure, you'll die within a few weeks. Your organs will start to melt.
Jeez.
But the numbers outside the reactors were around 1 million sieverts. And that's not because of Geiger counters, it's because of planes that flew over it. And they're able to extrapolate certain numbers. And that was one of the numbers they showed up, right? So that's no man's land. That's a lethal dose from 1,000 feet away, basically, 1 million sieverts. And so this is their solution was to tell a big lie. They had 1,200 miles of the coastline was ripped off, 2,000 square miles floating part of Japan out in the Atlantic Ocean, and heavy radioactive material fell on that fallout, and so that drifted all over the place, and also huge pellets that were under, got underwater, but it was still hung up in the debris, got carried far offshore. Now they also cemented the whole harbor of Fukushima plant because fuel rods had washed out there when the tsunami came back out. And there's in 2020 there was 736 pictures from a drone, very high quality, that got released. But nobody picked up on it, only a Chinese newspaper. I had translated it on a story about Fukushima. And I seen all these links to a TEPCO, so I opened one of the links, and it was a download of pictures. So I went to the site, TEPCO's site, and downloaded all the pictures. It was 736 pictures. And when I zoomed in on the pictures, all four reactors, reactor one, two, three, and four, were redacted, were pixelated out. And these were just days after the tsunami. So I went through all the pictures, 736 pictures. And what I noticed right away was behind reactor four was the common spent fuel pool, where they have reactor cores from all six reactors. There's six reactors on that site. Five and six are quite a far away north of reactor one, two, and three, and four. In between them is the dry storage, which is cast. They put 50,000-ton containers and they put fuel assemblies, reactor parts of the reactor core in the assemblies because they have cooled down for a few decades. And they're stored in what's known as dry cast. That was almost at sea level. So the majority of that got washed out into the ocean too.
Phew.
But the common spent fuel pool was all pixelated. And also when we headed north in the pictures, from the drone and zooming in, looking for anything that was pixelated. At reactor 5 and 6, reactor 6 and the pump house and the stack for the fuel pools were all pixelated. And so officially, now I have a lot of headlines suggesting there was definitely huge releases from reactor 5 and 6, all 6 reactors. And the twin nuclear power plant, the Dynie plant, 10 miles south, was an exact replica, was at the same sea level, the same foundation, built at the same time. Had major events there that appears to be covered up. They claimed, and we know the tsunami ran through that site the same as did 100 miles past it south, right? That whole coastline got washed out. It wasn't just one section. And which meant that they most likely had the meltdown there covered up. They acknowledged last year that they are never going to start there. That was the first time they acknowledged that they're not going to try to start that. They're going to decommission it. But we have headlines from the police apologizing and TEPCO apologizing for Dynie, because Dynie definitely had some kind of a meltdown, and it appears to be the reactor, or we know a reactor had hurt its containment, but we also know a fuel pool was in deep trouble. There was huge amounts of radioactive water in the buildings. The only way that can happen is if there was some kind of release, right? But we still we don't have the whole number on it. There's suggestions of other nuclear plants could have melted down, but there was 1,200 miles of the coastline. There was thousands of people killed. There's a lot of tragedies. There was boats everywhere, and nobody was really paying attention except for the tsunami kind of took over the airwaves. Very riveting. I guess you remember that, do you? The tsunami, the
Yeah.
original pictures.
Oh yeah, definitely. I when that tsunami happened, I was immediately on top of it,
Oh,
and from that
was that
moment,
so?
by the way, I also followed very closely from another who was capable from Japan apparently to show pictures, and I saw already disformed animals and the 30 million bags. I saw very close up pictures from that person, and that
Wow.
unfortunately that website is
Excellent.
gone.
Yeah.
But I was so following it from a close and felt like, oh, this is major. This
This
is, and I still cannot grasp why they put these nuclear plants so close to the coastline. But specifically, I know with the water that is handy, of course, with her because of the yeah,
Well, they built it in an earthquake zone, which is
yeah,
they have major
exactly,
earthquakes off that coastline for 3,000 years that they recorded.
yeah,
So they also known for 3,000 years that tsunamis up to 300 feet high will come in there every 100 years or less, right?
yeah,
But
exactly,
they would have significant ones shorter time span than that.
yeah,
So you're right when you said you don't understand why they built it.
yeah,
That's a great point, because why did they build it in a spot they knew this was going to happen at some point?
mm,
They knew it. They knew it, right? And
exactly,
they also know that the prevailing winds blow it to North America. Not all of it, but a huge amount of it goes straight across the ocean.
mm-hmm.
So they were captured by America after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And remember, Japan used to occupy North Korea for 50 years, right up until Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then the United Nations went in there and bombed North Korea into non-existence. That was because they just changed their name from League of Nations to United Nations. And one of the first acts, of course, which is Eisenhower warned us about the United Nations, there was the military industrial complex. You had 195 militaries under one leadership. How can that go good?
Mm.
And they've taken over the sovereignty of all these countries. These countries don't make decisions on their own. They make the decisions at the United Nations, so-called united, but it's not united.
No, no,
And they,
not at all. They're from the beginning. They're already for far too long. I felt like a danger in the United Nations. That's
so one of the commenters talking about they were born near the nuclear power plant in Netherlands and now live near a waste pit. My goodness, where medical waste was dumped in the 50s and 60s, and that's such a great point because I've seen so many examples of that all over the world over the years, and I didn't think about that for your country, so I'm glad you brought that up. Unfortunately, like what you got to do, and I don't know if you can or not, but if you can, you would like to move at least 50 miles away from any nuclear power plant. And usually the waste is kept within 10 miles of these places
Mm-hmm.
or dumped in the 50s and 60s and that. And that's a story that on its own, if you just looked at all the dumping from the 40s, 50s, and 60s into the local landfills, well, another way problem was, the exit signs, the glow in the dark exit signs, they're tritium.
Mm-hmm.
And so this stuff gets thrown into a landfill. That's enough to pollute the water table for about 25,000 people for a million
Mm.
years.
Yeah, that was a question as well with all that
Or 120
tritium
years, I'm
in
sorry.
exit signs and other for airports and so on. And is
There's
that being
millions of the signs. Yeah,
and so
millions of them were created.
these are also polluted as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Mm.
For 10 half-lives, they're 12 years each, 120
Mm.
years.
Phew.
And tritium, they use that in nuclear weapons to make the nuclear weapons two, three, 10 times more explosive. Is
Mm.
harmless tritium.
Yeah.
But tritium is a very dangerous isotope because it pulses energy at the speed of light, and
Yeah.
your body doesn't know how to defeat it, so it
Wow.
attacks it
Yeah.
and builds a tumor around it eventually.
Did you know,
But
by the way, to talk about tritium? Sorry, but I'm so
no, that's great.
enthusiastic
Go ahead.
with the
That's great.
watch that there are now cool watches who have a certain amount of
Tritium
tritium.
watches. That's right.
They are
And
cool now. Yeah, that's.
your smoke detector has americium 241 in it. That's a very powerful alpha.
Mm,
And I don't know how you ever got away with that, but if you're making a billion, so you say, well, Dan, there's not very much in there. Yeah, but if I'm making a billion a year, how much am I getting rid of each year into the local landfills? Because ultimately, that's where those cheap,
mm,
off the shelf $20, $10 smoke detectors they end up, right? The battery dies, it's cheaper to go buy another one than it is buy the battery. And so it gets thrown in the garbage. Uh, Americium, you crack that open and put that up by your Geiger counter will lose its mind. And if you
mm,
consume it, if you feed that to somebody, you're going to finish them eventually from it, right?
mm,
So if you grind it up and you put that in a food, that's going to mess somebody up in a few years. They're going to be stuck in the hospital.
mm.
So nasty. This is really dangerous stuff. And they're putting it in what? In smoke detectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's billions made each year of these things. And then there's like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. So many communities around nuclear mines and nuclear plants, the stuff left over was used to build the local sidewalks and houses, foundations, and all kinds of stuff. It's everywhere. There was lots of material, radioactive material, was recycled into spoons and steering wheels and kids' toys and stuff like that. And so it's very low radiation, but that's been shown to be very harmful.
Mm,
Yeah, right. And because we don't have a trigger for man-made, right? We don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend
mm.
against man-made
Yeah.
radiation. It's man-made. It's not made by the solar system. It's not made by the sun. And again, when you see the comment, more people having cancers, because there's 1,800 diseases. So is there more people having Alzheimer's? You should also think about, is there more people having heart problems? Right. So I always think about that. But cancer for sure. And there's many, many different types of cancer. There's absurd. I've done presentations on. So you go to a hospital and they say they're going to treat you with radiation to cure your radioactive cancer. And so they radiate you, and what that does is now you end up with tumors all over your body. But you got rid of the original one, but because there's litigation out there for people that went in to get neutron bombardment or beam therapy for cancer in their shoulder, and then their lungs are full of cancer because of the beams, right? But there's rectal cancer from that. There's eye socket cancers. There's intestine cancers. There's liver cancers from that. So you go in and you're basically being exterminated in your hospitals with quackery science on top of that. That couldn't stand up. So before they can do the radiation therapy, they call therapy to you, you have to sign a piece of paper saying that if you die from that, your family can't sue them for it because it's considered still 80 years later, still considered experimental. And so that should scare you because, they'll say, well, there's no cure and nothing we can do. And you're going to have to deal with it. And you say, well, please, can't you do something? You say, well, no, there's radiation, but you don't want that. No, I want it. I want my kid to survive. And in desperation, you do that to yourself. And so there's a mineral known as DCA, and I'm not sure if I can pronounce it correctly, dichloride acid, but just DCA. If you put that in Amazon.com, like the actual main site, Amazon.com, it'll probably show up for you, and it might ship to your country. It's just a mineral. So it's a mineral like vitamin C or vitamin D or vitamin E or whatever. But that particular mineral, all it does is unplate your blood. And so cancer plates up your blood. But this mineral actually reverses that particular thing because that's all it does is unplate your blood. And you can eat the whole bottle, and it can't do anything to you. But and you can't absorb it all because your body it's natural for your body anyway. But it can't harm you, right? Now, it's been shown to reduce all tumors, big hard tumors, by 70% in the first 3 weeks. So that's quite a staggering statement, right?
Yeah.
So now you don't have to get invasive surgery because you have this big tumor pressing on your organ. You take this stuff and you reduce the size of the tumor and you keep your organ. So you have much better chances of coming out of this clean on the other side, or at least surviving a more comfortable life, right?
Yeah.
But we've seen the original studies were out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and that's what they were showing. They were showing this was a cancer cure. But within a couple of years, the narrative come out that it's good to use with chemotherapy. Well, no, chemotherapy, radioactive chemotherapy is what I'm talking about. That's the opposite of good. And so this was the industry taking over. So within 2 years of that, they made it illegal to get a DCA in your local pharmacy. Normally, you just walk in any pharmacy in Canada. You still can in the United States, but walk in any pharmacy in Canada and pick DCA off the shelf and just go pay for it. It's like $100 for a bottle, but that's enough for 3 months. That's enough to kill a cancer. And so Canada made it illegal. They didn't want people treating themselves for cancer, they said. But we'll spend, because Canada has healthcare, but we're happy to spend $900,000 on people to get radioactive therapy. But you couldn't have, but you can take vitamin C, which is really good, by the way. But you can take vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin B, and everything else. But you couldn't have DCA because DCA was a cure. So they banned it here in Canada a few years back, about 5 years ago. I was completely shocked because everybody knew with cancer would go buy them a big bottle of it. And you watch it just get better and better and better. So they banned it. And that's how this industry rolls because a large part of the profit is from the hospitals. No two chemotherapy, radioactive therapies are the same. They're like terracotta soldiers. And if they actually cured somebody, when they died, they would put them in formaldehyde and take them to all the schools and towns and show them off. Like, we cured that guy with radiation. They'd be so proud of themselves. But I've never seen any examples. So I've heard people say, well, Dana cured me, Dana. No, you didn't have cancer in the first place is what happened to you. Because 3% of the people diagnosed with cancer didn't have cancer in the first place. That's usually, and that's the usual, the survival rate is about 3%. So in Australia and Canada, or Australia and New Zealand, Australia and America was 2.6%, and Australia was 3% of the people with radiation therapy lived 5 years or longer. And so the study was asking, why are we doing this? Why are we using radiation on the people in the hospital with a 3% survival rate after 5 years? So it's 97% death sentence. So they suggested not to take anything because you had better chances of going into a remission than you did of coming out the other end of chemotherapy. And chemotherapy was a very toxic thing to do to the body. So your quality of life disappeared immediately upon them injecting this hideous, monstrous odious isotopes into your body.
Well, maybe it's another question. Are you ready for another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wanted to mention, you take a drink. Do you need a break, Dana? A short break?
No, I do 5 shows a week. I'm sorry, I apologize, everybody. I might burp and everything when I'm doing this because I've been doing this for so many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you sit there and talk to yourself for 2 hours a day, try telling a psychiatrist you're not crazy, right?
Well, there are
Besides,
far more crazier people in the world. And you know who I mean.
if a psychiatrist asks me, does I talk to myself? I say, yeah, about 2 hours a day.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is a question, but it was already 25 minutes ago. And if it's not fitting in your train of thoughts and train
No, it's
of the
great.
whole, then just mention that. But it is.
Oh, I'm good.
Now, Tineke Jessie is so nice of you. She also greets you, Dana, and many
Hi
others,
there.
by the way,
Thank you,
are
everybody.
so happy
Welcome.
to have you back. And
Yeah, me too. Happy to see you.
one of them came by and said that even they afterwards they watch it again to really dig in and really let in your information, and they love
It's
your
a lot.
information. And
It's a
Tineke,
lot. Yeah.
yeah, and
It takes
Tineke,
a few times.
yeah,
It's worth it.
a few times,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's worth it. It's worth it, right?
Mm,
It's worth it to, and it's not that hard because it provides you with all the tools.
mm,
And then all of a sudden, you're able to extrapolate the information on your own, make your own informed decisions.
exactly.
And a couple of them could save your life and your child's lives and your loved ones,
Mm,
give them a healthier future, right? By making an informed decision. I
mm,
think that's one of the things that I managed to accomplish. I've wrecked the nuclear industry for sure by spreading disinformation because you don't see a nuclear renaissance, but you see all this hyperbole, this fake nuclear renaissance, but it's simply not taking place and statistically.
mm,
So in that scale, I um, I still accomplished lots because I'm targeting policymakers and investors, but also I made it so that anybody can understand it. I 100% believe everybody 100% are capable of learning this information if they give themselves a chance. And if you watch, we got 5 videos on this subject on your site. If you watched
mm,
all 5 of them and you're not articulated, then I'm going to retire because I gave you so much information. I actually weaponized you, and it might take a while to sink in. But if
mm.
somebody challenges you on this topic down the road, you're going to be surprised what you absorb watching this. You'll be surprised how articulated you actually really are at the end of 5 episodes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also tip for everyone. Watch. I have a playlist of all five. Well, it's now the fifth, of course. What we're doing now. So and even Tineke Jessie says like, when is Dana coming back again? So she says it, she
Oh
asks
yes,
it
no, we'll be back.
twice.
We'll be back.
So so she
Not getting rid of me that easy. No,
well
I try. This is my favorite environment. Is sharing information. I absolutely
yeah, exactly.
adore doing that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Another question from and Quinn on YouTube, but I think it already came by. What half-life does tritium H3 have, Dana?
Wow. Somebody said tritium H3. I can't remember the last time somebody actually said H3. It has a 12-year half life. But you're not going to find it without uranium, plutonium fission products and curium fission products, which is thousands and thousands of years of half life. And for every tritium you find, there's 600 isotopes you should find in the same sample. So if you take a liter, I wouldn't be surprised to see 600 betas, alphas, neutrons, gammas, and the X rays extrapolated from it. So whatever the strongest signal is, which is probably curium isotope and plutonium, uh, you won't be able to find the other isotopes because that one's so strong. That'll drown out the signal of tritium. It'll drown out the signal of cesium. It'll drown out the signal of hundreds of other isotopes because it has so much energy. It'll dominate your Geiger counter, so to speak. And so tritium does have a 12-year half-life. That's not, there's 10 half-lives, but it's impossible for tritium And let me bring you up to the share screen for just one picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that way people can understand why I say things. When I bring up the pictures, so there's no way to misinterpret what I'm saying. So the building to your left didn't just lose tritium, it lost around, say, 10 million pounds of uranium and plutonium and major daughters. Tritium is the last one you're worried about. The people to the right are pretending they're in the top of the building that doesn't exist. So you only think about tritium and you don't think about all the other isotopes that I was just talking about. So the whole planet has been misinformed so much, and this is a sustained campaign since July the 13th. It started in South Korea by a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering who came out and said that Fukushima's nuclear meltdowns was equal to 3 grams of sugar cubes, 3 sugar cubes going into the Pacific Ocean, and that the 1,000 tanks was the same, only had tritium, and that amount of tritium was equal, um, that was 2.2 grams. So the claim that only 2.2 grams was all got into the buildings that don't exist anymore was acknowledgement that they killed the ecosystem. And so now they're trying to bury the fact that there was any event at all. But because that information has been around for so long, I think it's a stunning story that they're coming out and talking about tritium 12 years later, when that's one of the very few times we've ever heard the word is is on August the 24th. And again, I'll bring up the pictures one more time. And just let me, when you look at these pictures, remember the reactor's tritium is the very last isotope you're worried about. And the building to your left is completely gone. Why are they pretending on the right to be in it? Because it's not tritium. So this is Unit 1 blowing up, reactor cores at the top of the buildings, which you see in dispersion there. The little square boxes to the bottom, they're 190 feet tall. That's the same size as the reactor that just disappeared right there, the top of it, which is that one. And to give you context of how big the buildings is, this picture, this is the constructing the framing for reactor 1 off-site, and they bring it in with cranes and assemble it because of lethal doses, right? But you can see how big Buddy is right there. Then you can comprehend, and you can see the structure over here. You can comprehend how big that is. So remember, it's 190 feet tall. There's 4 stories like that. And then they put a Kevlar sarcophagus around it. And then after 5 years, they took that off again. Now that Kevlar sarcophagus, if you take a square foot of that, it's so radioactive, and you bring it to a mall, everybody who walks past it for 1,000 years will drop dead. That was reactor 1. This is reactor 2. This was 100% meltdown and lost 6 to 10 reactor cores in the fuel pools. These are infinitely more than Chernobyl. Then there's reactor 4, as I showed you just now. I just want to show you reactor 3. This was the mixed oxide fuel. This had already fuel gone through chain reaction once. And so the problem with, I'll come back over to you guys. The problem with the mixed oxide reactors, well, the problem with any reactors is the radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So think how bad industrial poison is. So if I take industrial poison and I got my little Instagram account going, and I'm videotaping it and I'm putting it in your tea, and you drink it and you drop dead. And so like, wow, they dropped dead. That was fast. And so the police are going to come and arrest me, and they're going to do documentaries and how what kind of terrorist I was and everything else, right? So imagine nuclear is 2 billion times more toxic than that, right? And this is why we had terrorist laws for this stuff, because it's so toxic. And the industry is very secretive. And so they've done a lot of interbreeding. And over generations, this kind of relationship among the employees has produced the current generation of the nuclear industry, and what we call the entitled lot. And they've been coasting on their ancestors' legacy in the nuclear industry, which is just horrific. They've been desensitized, and they're genetically predispositioned to create more pollution, because that's what all their legacy of their family has done. And so they're a threat. what they're doing. And we've seen this in other industries like the military and that. It never turns out good for the 8 million species in humans. Okay, I got sidetracked. Was there any other questions, Ray?
No, it's also nice to read out loud a lovely comment, and again, so many people, again, greet you, or
Yeah, hi
and
everybody. Thank you
also,
so much.
yeah, everyone is so sweet and respectful also to each other. I love that also. So thank you all for watching on all the channels. By the way, I'm live on Trovo. I'm live on also on Rumble, on YouTube, on Twitch, and 3 Facebook pages. So
Crazy.
it's crazy, huh? Yeah, and I managed to do that. So I'm very lucky that
Not just
everything
once, but a
runs.
number of times.
Huh?
Not just once. You've done it a number of times.
Mm.
I'd be pretty proud if I could do it once.
Well, you have other qualities like have incredible knowledge. So about nuclear and
Helps.
energy. And Jos says, for example, we love you, Dana, and we are always learning from you. I also know Betje van Power, that's a name, from that because I asked you those questions in all 5 live sessions and have now learned even more from them. So yeah, he says
Thank you.
so that those comments, well, they're lovely. Thank you so much. And then from Anne Quinn, to you, Dana, did you see the water dumping video I forwarded to you, Dana? Filmed from a helicopter. I thought the 2 reactors were demolished. It looked like that anyway.
Right,
So,
I did. Thank
okay.
you. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Ray. Anything else?
I'm going through the chat.
So that's the right pronunciation, is it, Ray?
Again? Sorry?
R-A-E. How do I should have asked you how to pronounce that
Ray,
properly.
yeah, Ray is fine.
Because I'm notorious for butchering names. I
Well,
don't know why that is.
yeah, no, you're doing great. Otherwise, you would have already heard it from me.
Yeah, thank
Like,
you. Yeah. No. If
but
it was way off, you would have corrected me. Hopefully, yeah.
yeah, of course. No, I'm very clear in that. No, but and by the way, you also called out the name, my previous name, Monique. Also very. That was also very
Oops.
lovely. Oops.
Yeah.
But Jane says hello, and also Thea I saw come by, dropping in the chat. Thank
Hi,
you
everybody.
and
Thank you,
welcome
everybody.
everyone. Oh, and Quinn has another question. What happens to all the debris, steel, etc.? Is that also radioactive? You mentioned it actually already, but
90% of a nuclear power site, when they decommission, so-called decommissioning, which takes almost 100 years, all of that, 90% of the metal is too radioactive to be used again. But they found ways to get away with doing it. I see the comment here on this stream, the Restream, which is actually live, folks. It says that's the name of the site is Restream, but it's actually live if you're here right now. Somebody, Rob Star One, is asking, but I thought edit info down to 2 minutes for Twitter. I uploaded 90 videos in one day last week of less than a minute each. And then Google wouldn't let me upload any more videos for 24 hours. But I got 90 of them up that are less than 1 minute, just so people can have that bite-size video that is like, bam, and you got all the information. They're like, well, I said, that's a pretty neat little package.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a stupid amount of work to put that together. I did that all in one day from early in the morning till I think it was 10 o'clock at night or something.
Wow.
It was nonstop. It was really something. It was a lot of fun because I know these little videos, but the most I got on any video was 70 views. And so, these videos are usually associated with all kinds of other videos. I changed the tags on every video.
That changes,
the videos, my videos didn't make it out there, unfortunately. But hopefully people downloads it and post it other places.
Yeah, because there's on YouTube now the feature that you also can post another YouTube video on your own channel. But I also have to try out, and I did also post one of your shorts on my Facebook page.
Oh, awesome! Thank you.
Yeah, that is. But if once you got the views, then people start to discover you more. So hopefully it will Keep going,
I'm
I
gonna,
would say,
I'm,
because I
I'm gonna
love
do it.
them.
I'm doing it again. I'm gonna do it again this
Yeah,
week.
I love them
I don't know
from.
if I'm gonna do. I don't know if I'm gonna do 90, but thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was big. I might do 50. I did like. I was trying to do 100. That was. I had 110 put together. I was gonna be happy if I got 100 up by
yeah.
10 p.m. that night,
Gosh.
and I would have, but they cut me off at 90. I would have made the 100 video uploaded by 10 p.m., which was I didn't need a limit, but I decided to push myself to see if I can pull it off.
Mm,
And at that point, I think I was up around 40, 45 videos already uploaded. I said, well, 6 hours time, it'll be 10 p.m. So in the next 6 hours, I got to get another 56 or something uploaded.
yeah. And then
And
you put it in a kind of timer that every day you put on shorts.
so yeah, and so now what I'm doing is I'm doing a premiere each night. So there's
Mm,
still a comment section, there's still a poll,
yeah.
and the polls are really important.
Mm-hmm.
And we got 16 trips in on the ocean this year. And the migratory birds didn't show up. And we're on to is out in the Atlantic Ocean, the last speck of land, the most easterly point of the continent. And we typically get around 46 million seabirds, saltwater birds, each year migrate through here.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't seen any, not one.
Really? Oh gosh.
Not and then the indigenous seagulls and tickleass, which is like a little seagull, and then there is pigeons or puffins, which is the local population, seems to be here all year long. They're not getting their food from the ocean; they're getting it from the fish plant. And so I was wondering where the birds were feeding because I couldn't find any birds feeding in the ocean or anything moving in the ocean because you were getting days just like glass. And I was studying the colonies, the local bird hatcheries. And so for fledglings and chicklets and little newborns, we've seen between 4 and 10% survival rate on the 16th trip, which was just before they were learning to fly at that stage. And so I had breakdowns with the vehicles and the motor outboards and stuff like that because my equipment's pretty old. I've been doing it a long time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty tough to fund this operation, right? And so if that happens, we get through it eventually. But anyway, what I discovered, because what I was hoping was to get a few more trips in when the birds can fly, then out there on the boat circling the islands, I can see all the new ones and get a real tally. Because there's parts of the island you can't see, but you can extrapolate. I was seeing about a 4% survival rate, so we're saying it's a 10% survival rate. But at a 10% survival rate, that won't replace the current population. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a failure. And we've never seen a single bird in 16 trips. These are 6, 8 hour trips a day. Never seen a single bird feeding in the ocean.
So
And in the most populated spot on the planet for seabirds.
wow, that's yeah, it's sad. Yeah, I have no words for it. But
Somebody's asked me, have you ever thinking of making a channel on something, a new stream platform? I don't know what site you're talking about, Robster. Sorry.
oh yeah, the that is the TOS. That is websites are restricted on Twitch. So then you see the three star-like symbols.
Okay, sure.
But
Thank you.
I think he means you ever make a channel on. I think you have, for example, where I stream as well, Trovo. Did you think about going to Trovo?
Trovo.
Trovo.
I'll put it up here and look at it after. TROVO.
Yeah, I can send you later on a few, but there are
Okay.
others as well, like kick.com and odyssey.com. Maybe
I
you want.
tried kick.com last week. I'm
Ah,
glad you mentioned that. I got to try again. I couldn't seem to get accounts signed up.
yeah, because
Uh,
Rumble is also not really supporting
and
you, huh?
Rumble won't let me stream.
Ah,
And I produced a prolific amount of material, you know. Rumble's where you're supposed to go if you're censored, right?
mm,
And so they censored me,
mm, yeah.
which is pretty disappointing because there's not a lot of free. But I'm going to try that
Yeah,
Trovo,
I will
and
send you
Kick.
later on. Yeah, kick.com.
Somebody asked me how is my health. I'm doing good as far as I can tell. Like, most people that have been around knows I had 3 heart attacks in February and 7 stents put in. And so they opened up the whole pipe in there to get me back in business, basically, which is a record for the province, I think, for that many.
Mm.
It's just like little pipes they put in your heart valves to keep them open.
Yeah,
So I got 7 in there. So typically you get 1 or 2. So
exactly.
it's
I
a
wanted to say
pretty
like
big.
7 is rare.
Yeah,
7.
it's exceptional. The
Uh,
nurses couldn't wrap their mind around it. They actually flew in a team from the United States just to do me, and they flew away again.
hmm.
So I got lucky.
Yeah.
I yeah, I got really lucky that there are people out there decided that I should get another kick at the can. What a big mistake they made, eh?
Hmm.
Because like
Yeah.
I'm in this for a long time, a couple of decades now, and there's no way I'll ever let the nuclear industry alone for the rest of my life after what I've seen and what I know. I have so much information, I covered so much of it for
Hmm.
so many years. They deserve someone like me, and that's why. And so the name of my site is the nuclearproctologist.org. So a lot of people don't even understand that one. Because what
Hmm.
does a proctologist, it's not a
Yeah.
good thing. Most men don't want to hear that word.
Yeah.
So I go after Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT University, all the big shakers and movers. I'll find the nuclear academics' presentations and I'll go through it. If they're lying, I'll find the documentation to back up my assertion that they're telling a lie and in the hopes of discrediting them. Because I
Hmm.
take it very serious. These people got a crazy education, amazing amount of pedigree and everything else.
Hmm.
I don't have a right to attack that unless they deserve it, right? So I do my homework first, and if I find them to be completely heartless, soulless creatures, completely dishonest, then I'll come out and try to expose them.
Hmm.
And it's surprising how many of them reacted to my dissection and I provide the documentation. And what I discovered was that all of them were completely dishonest, and
Hmm.
that shocked me. Right? That's disappointing when you can't trust the scientists or your major universities. Completely disappointing.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And you were talking about health-wise. And by the way, thank you, Sunbeam Sting, for mentioning your website. But I also have it on stream all the time, so people can also see above us on the live.
Okay,
They see also
awesome.
your website.
Thank you.
And another question,
There's lots of
health-wise.
articles over there. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, health-wise, it's from Thea, and it is a question, so I will translate it. It is in Dutch that she had 2 times radioactive tablets for these glands here. Um,
For the thyroid.
yeah, thyroid glands, exactly. I know that.
Sure. No,
But
that's good.
so
Yep.
she has now many health issues. Is that possibly, can that be also the cause by these tablets she
Yes.
took? And by the
Yeah.
way, it's pretty. My heart goes out to you, Taya.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. When you take the pills, you're saturating your gland now, which is
mm,
not a normal for the gland. But
mm,
the idea was you want to saturate your gland with natural stuff. So when the man-made stuff came through, it didn't end up specifically in your thyroid gland because you start making all these radioactive hormones for starters, right? So you're trying to prevent that from happening. And it's debatable whether that works or not. But what does happen is you're saturating with a high level than is typically able to handle. You're saturating it. And that's been known to cause a lot of health issues. But my experience, you can have thyroid issues if you're buying food grown near a nuclear power plant, or if you're buying food that's grown and from Fukushima Prefecture was shipped into your country.
mm,
Like in Canada, Canada removed all restrictions on Fukushima after 93 days. Um, but 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima, which is basically half the country because they're big prefectures. The food was banned from half the country, 14 prefectures, for a decade by 55 countries. But so Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere, only Canada for the first 10 years, basically. There
Mm-hmm.
was a few other places that opened up, New Zealand, Australia, Britain for certain products. 4 years ago, Britain removed restrictions on baby food and cereal from Fukushima nuclear wasteland. And then 2 years later, removed restrictions on the rest of the food for. So 4 years before they removed it for the adults, they removed it for the children. I don't know what kind of evil that actually is, but I think it's a whole different. It deserves its own different category. Because why would you remove? Because they're the most vulnerable on top of that of society. So why would you remove restrictions on baby food and cereal, which most kids will love to eat,
Mm-hmm.
before you know, before you remove the restrictions on adults? That's some insane stuff. And that was Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom done that. I was absolutely horrified and still am today that something like that. That shows us some serious contempt, not just from the nuclear industry either, but contempt from the medical establishment, who from the health authorities and everybody else, who had to acquiesce for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So total betrayal across the board is what we're used to now, and it's disappointing, as to say the least, that the system is ultimately the universities and medias are 100% corrupted. I was stunned. I was floored a few years back when we got confirmation from the documentation that this it's worse than that. They hate us. Let me give you an example that's incontestable, that's unassailable. No matter who you are, where you're from, you'll get this picture when I show it to you. It should be coming up any second for you. Yeah, there she blows. The media on the right is pretending they're 100 feet above the carnage to the left, the stump of reactor 4 from Fukushima to the left. If that's not contempt, what actually is? And if they've done that, what else have they done? That's the scariest thing imaginable. So they're pretending they're in a building and they have no fear that they're going to be exposed. They're all getting their current pay for most of them are $1 million a year. ABC Cecilia Vega in the bottom right hand corner. She makes almost $1 million a year. She's the White House press secretary for CBS right now. So she's in the White House as a press club, and here she is pretending she's in a building that don't exist, and the repercussions is billions of people might end up getting sick and die from up to 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries ultimately. I think it's amazing because they know what they're doing, right? They're journalists, they're not naive or gullible, they're not uneducated, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, here I see a comment from Jane. Hi, Jane, also welcome on YouTube. I know she was a journalist as well, and she says, as a news reporter, I was covering the health issues related to main nuclear power plant and got targeted by U.S. government as a result. So,
Yeah, right away, I bet too.
uh,
Yeah, it's an instant reaction. I'm sorry they've done that to you.
mm,
That's terrifying. And now, originally, there was a lot of journalists speaking out because that's where I got my information from the first couple of years. But that and even in 2015, there were still some dissenting voices. But by I
mm-hmm,
think around 2017, 2018, it was pretty slim picking. By 2019, it was non-existent. In 2020, 2021, 2022, and again this year, we're way down the road, 9 months into it. I haven't heard a single journalist in at least 4 or 5 years
mm-hmm,
that didn't lie about every facet of the story. Whereas before, so what we started noticing was the journalists didn't stop writing about it; they disappeared from those medias, right? Because you know how bad I am. I was taking the stories and going hunting down the journalists to see what else they wrote. And the only stories I was finding from on them total on the sites were still there a lot of the times, but were from the first few years. And that journalist wasn't with that media no more. And we know now that in the last decade, he bought up most of the media that was independent worldwide. And all the
mm-hmm,
little communities and all the major economies were scooped up. Yeah. And
mm-hmm,
somebody, Rob Starr was mentioning EU imports rice from Japan and it's getting mixed. That's right. And so what Japan was doing to get around embargoes and sanctions was ship it to other prefectures that didn't have embargoes, mix it there, ship it to a third country, and then relabel it and ship it onto your country. Because there's 14 prefectures were banned by 55 countries for a decade. So think about the poundage we're talking about. You're talking around 5 or 6 billion pounds of rice alone. And so in the first year in Japan, it was 865,000 extra cancers. But not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed, and there's other diseases that you need to be looking for. So it's bad, right? And so what they done was they shipped a lot of that food. A lot of it was turned into sake, and the Japanese prefecture government itself opened a sake shop in New York City in America to sell the sake they wouldn't sell in their own country because of the radiation. And children. What kills me is the children, and the pets too are being destroyed with radioactive pet food. Um, and then there's no need to do this to humanity. Why? Like, you've heard the expression of depopulation probably for a lot of people out there. But this is not depopulation. This is extermination. This is all species. This is uh, textbooks call it an omnicide, where you attack all species, bacteria, fungus, and everything else. And that's what's going on. So that's not tenable. That's not sustainable to unleash a weapon that never goes away. So a chemical weapon eventually will dissipate and will become inert at some point, right? It might take a year or 5 years. Like, Vietnam, that was a chemical weapon, Agent Orange. There's still 3 million children average yearly down there that are disfigured from the
Mm.
Agent Orange. They used it to defoliage the country, take all the plants and trees out of the country, and by proxy, you got rid of all the insects too, right? And where did most of that stuff run off to? Down to the coastlines. So you got rid of the nurseries of the coastlines at the same time. It was hideous, but it shows you what they're capable of, and they still don't have any remorse today from it. The administrations in the United Kingdom, there's like 9 or 10 administrations since the nuclear industry, and you had all these test victims that they had sitting on Christmas Island and other places, Maralinga, which is in Australia, and they radiated them to soldiers, and they studied them like lab rats ever since. And now United Kingdom is giving out medals to the survivors. Well, probably because there's not many of them left, right? They're in their late 90s if they are alive. And the story just came out. There was a 94-year-old soldier. Ex-soldier gets a medal for being irradiated and getting sick and passing it on to his children. And then he knows he got blood samples because they took it off him, and he remembers it clearly. And there was a lot of them. He don't remember all of them, but he knows there was a lot of blood. After each nuclear test, a day later, somebody would take blood samples. And those blood samples still exist, and they needed them for their records, and the government refuses to acknowledge they exist. But he knows they exist, and other advocates have quantified that they exist. So that disconnect is carried over generation after generation after generation. When Fukushima happened, the story came out originally. The industry got control of the narrative, the universities, the medias, and now they're claiming nothing happened. Only 3 grams of sugar got out since July the 13th of this year. And so where does that leave us? It's like saying, I don't know how to explain something that crazy. You kind of got to make up your own terminology in one way. How can you pretend that reactors didn't melt down? Why would you do
Mm.
something like that? 12 years later, why would you like just change the story? And again, watch the pictures. I'll bring up a picture and explain to me, somebody, for goodness sakes, what was the thinking behind pretending or claiming now this is just 2 of the 4 reactors? But how can you claim that only 3 grams of sugar got out of these buildings? These buildings don't make sugar, these are nuclear meltdowns. But this is nuclear and quantum engineering professors saying stuff like that. This is the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, going country after country after country since July the 13th of this year for the last 79 days, saying nothing got out of this. And so why, even though for 12 years they said, something got out of there, they still wouldn't admit the significance of what got out of there, but at least they acknowledged the pictures existed. Now they're claiming that doesn't exist. So what the hell are they doing? My goodness. And so that leads us back to the tanks. I counted the tanks, and I counted 750 tanks. If you count those small tanks, so there's 100 right there, and there's 50, I think, right here. And if you count all the small tanks, you end up with 750 tanks, not 1,000 tanks. So originally, back in the day, there was 1,000 tanks in 2013. And that was Mari Yamaguchi. And she's been showing up. She seems to be the official cover story from Associated Press. And then that story gets regurgitated worldwide. So they had 1,000 tanks in 2013. They had 1,200 tanks in 2014. In 2017, they had 900 tanks, 900 large, densely packed tanks. My apologies, everybody. So try walking with both of your heels on the ground. And that's not realistic. And they're walking on steel plates, by the way. If you fill up one of these tanks with the material water you're pouring over the reactor melted cores, then you're looking at 2.2 sieverts per liter just of beta, which means that you can't build another tank. And that guy walking here will drop dead from the neutron bombardments. In 2019, they said they had 1,000 tanks, which is there 4 lines from the bottom. In 2021, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2000, Mari Yamaguchi. In 2023, they have 1,000 tanks. So 1,000 years from now, though, the water may still be contaminated in the Pacific. Okay. But let's go to the water filtration. And I'll come back over to the normal one now. So in 2014, 3 years later, the Riva water filtration, which is the same as the ALP system, didn't exist, was on years kept out of operation. In 2014, the ALP system had yet to function, was kept out of use, was unoperational. And the problem is, because you're talking about 2.2 sieverts a liter, then you can never change the filter or get back into buildings if you did use it. It was the tanks are designed to manipulate you into complacency. In 2014, they were going to build a bypass operation for $1 billion. That didn't work. In 2013, they admitted they can't build a fence, which they wanted $1 billion for. But you can't build a fence to stop radiation because you need a bottom and a top. In 2014, the ice wall didn't work. So all the so-called mitigations were a flop. They flew over the place. There was 3 million becquerels a square meter, 1,000 feet above the ground. At 3 million becquerels rather per square meter. That's a nuclear wasteland. All the acknowledgement of how radioactive water is. So when you put it all together, and I'll come back over to you guys, what you're talking about is the tanks were built to trick you. And so this year, they're claiming that they've just started releasing anything from the site itself. But don't worry, over 30 years, it'll be equal to 3 grams of sugar. And so that's what you would say to like a child you were trying to console or something, right? That's not something you would say because the pictures exist. You can go look up you'll find all the pictures I'm showing you. They actually exist. And so I don't think it's a very thought out, or maybe it is, but this was orchestrated by the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're the ones that are doing the press conferences, and they're the IAEA is part of a corporation, a corporate personhood known as International Atomic Energy Agency, is part of UN. UN is a corporation. They don't have any sovereignty over anybody's country. They can't compel you to do anything. They're just a corporation. They're like McDonald's or whatever. they're the same structures. What I'm trying to say. So they don't have the authority to do anything, but they do have 195 militaries at their fingertips, so they can start stuff, right? But they don't have that authority, and they admit that they are not regulatory agencies, that they don't collect samples on their own. They've only been to the plant 5 times since 2011, 12 years, and all 5 of them were this year. One to promote redistribution of 30 million one-ton bags of radiation that they picked up, and the other one was to promote that story of 2.2 grams of tritium is all that got out of buildings that don't exist. So, like, to the average person, I sound like a schizophrenia. I don't know, Ray, what do you think? Does that sound schizophrenia or something? Because that's the truth, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. I can repeat it. It is amazing how the world is not even not really researching it. That is, I'm still flabbergasted by it. That it's still not entering. So yeah,
It's heartbreaking.
it is.
And
It is. I'll still remember that the first shows I saw of you, because I follow you already from quite some years. Also, when you still had, I believe, even 14 to 15,000 subscribers on YouTube, but that I saw a dying starfish. I will never forget that. And I was already
wow.
watching a few of your live streams, but then suddenly I saw that dying starfish, and I felt it. It broke my heart almost. Like I really cried. I literally cried.
I did
But
too, yeah.
and
I
it's
did
so
too. When I
heartbreaking.
realized
Yeah,
I done
and
it on live on here trying to tell the story,
yeah,
trying to
and
warn
also,
people.
for example, you show that a lot, but my heart breaks as well when I see these children, for example, play garden, quite near that Fukushima, and yeah,
The
that's
harm to the
heartbreaking
children is
too.
horrific.
It is,
The
uh,
statistics,
yeah, and they,
newborn babe. Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
no, but that they were walking with these necklaces where they had these so-called
Yeah. There's
Geiger.
90,000 children
Mm,
were given Geiger counters
mm,
to wear to school, which is dosimeters actually, were that
yeah,
only can be read by the universities in
mm,
America.
mm,
Were given, and pregnant women, 90,000 children, rather than move them out of the nuclear wasteland, they gave them dosimeters so they can study them, which is crimes against humanity to do stuff like that. Leave
yeah,
them in a nuclear wasteland, yeah. And we have a big list of communities that are, the numbers are unbelievable. And the United Nations, UNSCLEAR went in there and claimed that it was okay to live there. It was like a banana or a potato chip, which got nothing to do with anthropogenic man-made radiation. They got nothing to do with it. So 80 years of this lie, and that's what they revert to quantify the cruelty of what they're doing. I get angry about it when I see the children being
mm,
into the nuclear wasteland. I have a huge collection of Geiger just after the accident where they're checking all these children with Geiger counters.
mm,
What happens though is the Geiger counter gets a big dose and it breaks. So the rest of the children aren't getting an accurate reading because this thing doesn't work proper anymore.
mm.
And you're supposed to send it back to the factory to get recalibrated when it gets a high
Okay,
dose, right?
yeah,
So a friend of mine, Yoshi Samatsu, was the former editor of the Japan Times for the Sunday edition.
mm-hmm,
And for 2 years, I'd done a radio show each Sunday with him. If I
mm,
wasn't out on research expeditions for months at a time, even if I was, I would try to go in to fuel up in some port, and then I would get in on the show that night, right, and head back out on the ocean. I was usually gone 2 weeks at a time. You're going from port to port along the coastline, and in between, you're studying all the species. You go in, do laundry, get fuel, get groceries, and head back out on the ocean. It was a relentless pace for 4 to 5 months a year for 6 years. But what we ended up was incontestable that this is an extinction event. But Yoshi Shimatsu rode in the Fukushima city right after, and he had 3 Geiger counters, and he
mm-hmm,
was on a bicycle. He originally wasn't allowed to take a vehicle in there, or no, Akuma, and 3 of the Geiger counters broke because of radiation, and within 2 weeks, he lost most of his teeth. And he was, you know, I'm forensic. He was a forensic investigative journalist with the Japan Times, but he was retired, and so it's a big deal. That was a big, still is a big paper today. Oh yeah, they blocked me this morning actually.
Oh, yeah, Oh,
Again, because
I,
I just put in documentation, right, and
mm.
you're only allowed to talk about only the comments there are Tritium. Everything else is blocked. Our cases. They hate us that much, you know.
Yeah.
So how we doing for time, right? I just noticed
Well,
it was getting up there.
it's now a 11:15, so we're now live for sure for, let me count, 2 hours and 45 minutes, so that's quite a lot. But I saw still a question come by already earlier. I think it came from Jane as well. Is there a replacement which is safe for use of instead of smoke alarms? What could we
Yeah, there are
use?
smoke alarms without americium in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a replacements, lots of replacements you didn't need to use to americium 241.
Mm.
They only done it to get rid of americium 241 so they wouldn't have to store it for a quarter million years.
Yeah.
So to come up with that solution, pretty nasty, really. And
And
you just have
which?
to
Yes.
learn, check around. You'll find
Mm.
smoke detectors. I don't know the names off the top of my head, but if you check, you'll find alternatives to americium, ameriicum 241 smoke
Yeah.
detectors with an alternative without americium. And you'll start finding different ones. You'll probably find them on
Mm.
Amazons too.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because I was thinking even of all these smoke alarms also in the Netherlands. They're also more introduced. Also here with us in the house. That was how do you say that? Yeah, more and more residency
Yeah,
organizations are obliging us to take them. So I was
that's
thinking,
right.
oh, I have them now also in the house. So I was thinking
Yeah,
about, can I check? I can be capable of checking that, of course. So I will do my information run as well on that. So,
yeah, it's heartbreaking that they got away with stuff like that.
oh, incredible.
And see, they're if you look right now, there's nobody else on the planet doing what I'm doing. There's no one on the planet showing the documentation,
Mm,
and so I've been trying for over a decade doing these shows 5 days a week, and in the hopes that I would create like 500 people talking about the subject, and with their other stuff that they're doing, and it didn't happen. Oh my
mm.
God, because it's such a difficult subject. So
Yeah.
I've always tried to make it more accessible because I'm starting to wonder if we'll ever get like you're doing it. So right, so you're actually talking about it. You got me on. You're talking about it. So you're one of the very few people, right, that is understands that. Hey, this you folks. You got to protect yourself. You got to know about this kind of stuff too.
Mm.
And I'm not seeing that, but I'm not seeing. And I don't fight it anymore. But it's just I was expecting a lot of people because it's pretty concerning to
Mm.
pick up on it, and it never happened.
Yeah, well, at
It's
least the
it's confusing.
disformation, what they do about that Fukushima one reactor, that it's the BBC. You show it every time, that video. So there is a cover up going on. Um,
100%. Yeah.
this
Shocking.
Yeah, and I must say, I felt, for my feeling and from my heart, like I want to invite you, but I also did a couple of months thinking about it. Should I do that? Because I knew I have not the knowledge like you have, but it is really, I learned so much also by having you in my live stream. So I'm really honored that you're here, a
Thank
guest,
you.
for the fifth
I'm
time.
definitely. Well, in the preamble, me and you were talking before the show,
Mm.
and you were doing really good. You were holding your own. You were articulated. And that's what I mean. You don't realize how quick this stuff sneaks up on you. And once you start getting dragged into the conversation, you go, no, actually, that's right. I seen this, and I was wondering this, and you were nailing it all over. which meant, right, that it works. Because you see the pictures over and over, and I give you these. I'm pretty good at giving you an ultimatum with the picture, right? Did anybody really think 2.2 grams got out of the buildings that don't exist anymore? Could it possibly be that 10 million pounds got out of the building? Because that's quite the difference.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. If you go to if you got a business and you ask your employee how much money did you make today, and he says $2.20, and you check your account, and you got $10 million in the account. Then you're wondering why they said $2.20. What's going on there? Why did you do that? See? But in this case, we can't ask the question, right? Because they're saying 2.2 grams is all they got out of the buildings, but each building had around 10 million pounds, so it's around 40 million pounds that got out of the buildings. Versus the official story is 2.2 grams, and it's like what? So I thought that might resonate for people. I hope it does.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, not to go away from the subject, but it is Thea still has a comment here about her it's in Dutch, so I translate it in English. The first time after the treatment, so that was with the thyroid gland here earlier, Thea.
Right?
After the treatment, when I came home, there was a car which has that automatic that the automatic can steer and it's funny
Okay.
to translate
So
it, but it's like a self-driving car, I think,
yeah, that's
and
right. Yeah.
and that started to spontaneously drive while everything was out, was everything was off. So that's what she shared, that it was weird after that treatment with the radioactive.
Wow.
Even my ears, my earbud fell off. So did you get the question,
Oh.
Dana? It was hard to translate, Dana. I apologize,
It
but
was that was actually so I don't know where to go with that one. That's
yeah, me neither. But I think she wanted. It's more like sharing, and
yeah.
about that she
She's
felt
talking about
maybe there is a connection with with the energy, with the radiation, and that that's
I got studies that show that certain frequencies will excite the radiation, the
mm,
isotopes.
mm,
And so certain isotopes can be excited by certain frequencies. And so that's a very bad thing. And
mm,
so these are academic studies.
mm,
And so the suggestion was that if you got a lot of radiation in your body and that frequency is nearby, it's going to make things infinitely worse. And I don't know how much worse, but I'm assuming it's very significant depending on the quantity you got in your body.
mm,
That so I started going down that rabbit hole just quite a few years ago,
mm,
and that worries me that it has that particular attribute. And so I know for a fact, like I love electric cars, but there's a problem with electric cars is there's a field of energy inside of it,
mm,
and that frequency doesn't resonate well with your body's frequency, and so it can make you ill. Try wrapping your mind around that statement.
mm,
But that's because of frequency. And it's a well known phenomenon, right? That frequency can cause you lose your balance, for instance, all kinds of different stuff.
mm,
And so you'll feel nauseated because you don't have your balance. You don't, and so there were certain devices and frequencies that they had to avoid. So when they first built the TVs and the old TVs had the big tubes and everything, they're scary. That stuff is scary. But the frequency of that TV was synced with the frequency rate of a child's brain. And so a child would sit in front of the TV and get sucked right into it. And the parents would yell out to the child, time to go to school or it's supper time. And the child couldn't hear them. They got sucked into this machine that they call a TV.
mm,
And uh, it was very dangerous. As a young kid, you probably remember how hard that can be on your eyes. These were weapons, literally weapons. And so when TV first came out, it was so powerful that if the left-leaning political party, was on TV for 2 hours, they had to have the right-leaning party on TV for 2 hours too, because if you don't, then everybody's going to vote for the left because it's such a persuasive platform, see, and the frequency was
Mm-hmm.
so effective. Yeah, and same. And so when you put in radiation from nuclear fallout into that equation, you have to wonder, was there another something else going on there? Because you excite those frequencies, and that's where the tumor is going to show up down the road, is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or, other adverse side effects.
Yeah. Well,
Um, was there any more questions, Ray?
I'm just, well, there is something funny happening on Nobby Noble. I have an AI which is called Nightbot on YouTube. And Nobby Noble, you have humor, but it is, yeah, it's funny comments about it that the Nightbot is a bit out of order, but that happens with AI as well. Don't see any other questions. I will check on, let me see. Maybe I can do something about it, Nobby Noble. I'm doing a lot of channels at the same time, Dana. So I apologize
Yeah,
for
no,
that.
it's all good. No. I can't imagine how difficult it actually is.
I learned from that also a lot. So no, don't see questions there. Uh, on my other channels, not no, I don't see any questions. But yeah, we are already live for almost 2.5 hours, and my experience is that information can only enter in people for a certain amount of time. I think you know that as
Yeah.
well. That it's
100%. Yeah.
otherwise it's an overload, or well, people can of course rewatch it, but I also feel a certain fulfillment in it. And do you have something to say yet, or what you wanted to?
At the end of it here, no. Just that getting educated is never going to harm you. And unfortunately, there's nowhere else you're going to get this information, these pictures, and these presentations, this documentation, the research that I've done. And so it's all here in a nice, clean package. There's 5 videos on Ray's site, which is just tons of information
Mm,
that there's, you can extrapolate accurately your own questions by watching these videos. It's all here. We covered a huge amount of subjects. It might not
mm,
seem that way at the end of the show, but um, you know, I'm very content that we got out this much information in a single show, and
exactly.
so I feel great about the audience is well informed if they watch the whole presentation, and if not, this is their first time ever hearing it. They might need to listen to it in the background a couple of times, but it will resonate because of the pictures. It will sink in,
Yeah.
and they can't fool you. So we won again, see, by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Each time we do this, people win. Okay.
Exactly. And I still
Uh,
will check still some comments here.
yeah,
Jane
just
says,
have a boom.
yes, it was the 1980s. I was exposing the dangers. I was blacklisted and could not get a job riding in Maine after that. There was a strong anti-nuke community for a while on Maine. That's what she mentions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories over the year, and every time I hear it,
Mm.
it makes it just helps. It adds up
Yeah.
to the real horrors. This industry is crazy, and
It,
they need checks and balances, and we don't have any.
yeah. Well, what for me is so entering is like all that stuff has been stapled. So because it's indestructible, it's man-made, and then I talk about the nuclear energy. Yeah, the longer it keeps going, that pile staples, and then it's even a harder problem to ever get rid of it. You know, that is the scary thing. I think. What do we leave behind for the generations to come, for our children's future, for Earth's future? So yeah, I'm
That's the
really
right. That's the right way to think. Right?
Yeah.
That's the appropriate thing to think. And it might seem depressing to some people, but
Yeah.
that's how you come up with solutions. You got to have a talk about it. So if it's
Yeah.
depressing, then it's a worthy problem to deal with, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's yeah. That is the hardest thing for me. Like it's staples, and yeah, is there a solution?
Well, you can hold them accountable, so that's pretty cool. And it's not too late to hold them accountable, and it's not too late to start coming up with solutions. You
Yeah.
got at some point we're going to come up with solutions
Mhm.
because we got no choice, right?
Yeah.
And so we need solutions. And the
Mhm.
best way to come up with solutions is the more people know about the topic, the more likely we are to have a solution. If you had a meteorite coming at your planet, everybody would try to come up with a solution. You might even come up with one.
Yeah.
But if it's invisible and you can't see it, nobody can come up with a solution. And that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Is
Oh, that's
they've made it invisible. Yeah.
well. That's greatly put and greatly mentioned and explained like that. So those are great words. Maybe to go to closure. And I will one time check the channel. I did not check a lot. But I don't see, and I am live on Rumble because Rumble is very unstable when I go live. But now I am live there, but I don't see any
Chat.
questions. Oh, that's no questions further there, and I will check on Trovo, one of my favorite channels. Thank you for watching as well, dear people on Trovo, and no questions there as well. So, well, and again, and to Nubby Noble on YouTube, I will next time put off Nightbot, or I will change something there, Nubby Noble. But thanks for holding on there with the Nightbot. Really went out of the borders there with the AI. But yeah, well, maybe this is a nice way to round off and to close this live stream. Thank you all so incredibly lot for watching, and yeah, maybe Dania will come back another time.
No, for
Uh,
sure.
And I love it because
For
I
sure.
learn even more. Because when I'm live streaming, then even I have to listen even more concentrated. So I learn so much every time. So thanks so much for being here again, Dana.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And well, then I say we will see you next time, and I will also put it on my channels and promote you
Thank
as
you.
well. And dear people, follow Dana and support him as well. By also because you also have your T-shirts and so on. You have your own. I saw a couple. I saw a
some of them
couple.
are doing pretty good.
Yeah, I saw
So
some.
awesome.
Yeah, I saw. I visited your web shop and I saw very funny texts, and that's very great things.
Yeah,
So yeah,
my shirts are the best, man. The quotes on them are
yeah, they're great.
save the whales, ban nuclear power,
For example, yeah, the
save the
hoodies.
insects. Yeah, hoodies. I'm
Exactly.
surprised how good that stuff does. Now I don't make any profit off my shirts; they're all at cost.
Mm.
But just having that out during the conversation is worth it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is. I can imagine when people wear them and that they get questions from the public, and that's great because when
And I
people
have a
starts
lot of
to
them have,
ask,
yeah, yeah.
that's
A lot of
also.
the pictures reactors are there, right?
Mm,
And so that's a great way to start a conversation. There's the
exactly.
picture right there. You can't
Mm,
avoid it.
exactly. Yeah.
And they come with great questions and great
Whoa.
statements.
Yeah. A new follower. That was the sound. So I
Yeah,
apologize.
I don't hear it on my end. Yeah.
Oh, you don't hear them. Oh, well. In my
Yeah,
one of in my ears is now a bit
yeah,
tone
a
deaf,
little.
but yeah, it was loud. But thanks
That's
for
great.
joining, new follower on Twitch, and well, again, dear people, thanks everyone for also your nice comments. Also to Dana, they say all goodbye.
Good
Uh,
night, everybody. Thank you
and
again, everybody, for finding time.
yeah, and see you all next time, and I will keep you all posted. And for coming Tuesday, I have not planned a live stream, but the Saturday coming, so not well. That's called coming Saturday. Then I will do another live stream, and that will probably be in Dutch speech, and that starts then 7:30. So, dear people, thank you again for joining and for your beautiful and lovely questions as well to Dana. And see you all next time. And thanks for being here. And of course, also, it would be great if you subscribe, follow, share, like to Dana's YouTube channel and my channel to support and to help us grow in the whole big forest of all these other creators. So that would be great. And again, thank you all so much and see you next time. Bye bye, everyone. Dana, a last word.
Yeah, I loved it. Appreciate everybody here. You have a wonderful day, and thank goodness you found me. Take care, folks.
Alrighty. Bye bye, everyone.